Have you ever wondered what secrets lie hidden beneath the waves or buried deep within forgotten forests? There is something profoundly human about our fascination with stories of lost worlds, those magnificent civilizations that supposedly thrived long ago, only to vanish without a trace. We are drawn to these tales not just because they spark our imagination, but because they touch on something deeper, a universal longing to uncover pieces of our past that might explain who we are today. These are more than just myths, they are echoes of human ambition, curiosity, and the age-old desire to believe that greatness once existed in places we can no longer see. Today, we are setting out on a remarkable journey to explore 30 of the most captivating ancient myths of the lost world. From the sunken splendor of Atlantis to the enigmatic ruins of Lemuria, from the golden cities of El Dorado to the whispered secrets of Hyperborean kingdoms, each of these stories has been passed down through generations, blurring the lines between history and legend in the most intriguing ways. They have inspired explorers to venture into uncharted territories, artists to create timeless works, and philosophers to ponder the fragile nature of civilization itself. What is it about these tales that continues to captivate us century after century? Together, we'll dive into the origins of these enduring myths, tracing their roots across different cultures and eras. We'll examine why they resonate so deeply with the human spirit and what they might reveal about our collective memory and fears. Along the way, we'll encounter fascinating questions that challenge everything we think we know about history. Could there be fragments of truth hidden within these legends? What do they tell us about the societies that created them, and how have these stories shaped the way we view our own place in the world? This is not just a recounting of fantastical tales, it's an invitation to look at history through a different lens, one that embraces mystery, wonder, and the possibility that our past is far more extraordinary than we ever imagined. Our journey into these lost worlds begins, as it must, with the most famous and enduring legend of them all, the story of Atlantis. This is the tale that has, in many ways, defined the entire genre of lost civilization myths. It was the ancient Greek philosopher Plato who first gave this island nation a name and a history, recounting its story in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BC. He didn't present it as a mere folktale, but as a supposedly true account passed down to his ancestor, Solon, by Egyptian priests. According to Plato, Atlantis was a formidable naval empire, existing some 9,000 years before his own time. It was a place of immense wealth and power, with a sophisticated society that launched a campaign to conquer the ancient Mediterranean world. Its eventual downfall was as dramatic as its rise. After a failed assault on Athens, the entire island succumbed to a cataclysmic event, sinking beneath the waves in one terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods. What makes Plato's account so compelling are the vivid details he provides about Atlantean society. He describes a highly advanced civilization, organized with a complex social structure and governed by a confederation of kings. The heart of their empire was the capital city, built in concentric rings of land and water, showcasing architectural genius with bridges, canals, and tunnels that connected the city to the ocean. The central citadel housed a magnificent temple to Poseidon, adorned with precious metals like silver and gold, and even a mysterious metal called orichalcum. Beyond its material splendor, Plato's Atlantis served a moral purpose in his writings. It was a cautionary tale about the hubris of nations, a powerful reminder that even the greatest of civilizations can fall when they become morally corrupt and arrogant, challenging the gods. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato was recording a genuine historical event, crafting a philosophical allegory, or simply telling a good story. This very ambiguity is the fuel that has fed 24 centuries of searching. The quest to find a real Atlantis has taken explorers and researchers to every corner of the globe. Some theories place it in the Mediterranean, suggesting the Minoan civilization on Santorini, which was devastated by a massive volcanic eruption, could be the historical kernel of the myth. Others look to the Strait of Gibraltar, just beyond the Pillars of Hercules as Plato described, while more adventurous hypotheses have placed a sunken continent in the Caribbean or even the South China Sea. The enduring power of Atlantis lies in this perfect storm of elements, a detailed origin from a respected ancient source, a description of a utopian society with technology that seems almost magical, and a dramatic, mysterious end that leaves no evidence behind to disprove it. It represents the ultimate archaeological puzzle, a blank space on the map that invites us to project our own ideals of a perfect society and our deepest fears of societal collapse. Atlantis is more than a sunken city. It is the original template for every story about a glorious past that was lost, waiting just out of reach for us to rediscover. While Atlantis captures our imagination with its tale of a sunken utopia brought down by arrogance, another lost world legend emerged not from ancient philosophy, but from the rigorous yet ultimately mistaken science of the 19th century. This is the story of Lemuria, a phantom continent whose journey from scientific hypothesis to mystical homeland is a fascinating chapter in the history of ideas. The myth was born in the mind of British zoologist Philip Sclater, who was deeply puzzled by a specific biological mystery. He noticed that fossils of lemurs, those wide-eyed primates, were found in Madagascar and India, but were entirely absent from the mainland of Africa and the Middle East. In 1864, this distribution made little sense. How could the same animal exist on two landmasses separated by a vast expanse of ocean? To a Victorian scientist working before the discovery of plate tectonics, the most logical explanation was a land bridge. Sclater proposed that a massive continent must have once stretched across the Indian Ocean, connecting India to southern Africa, and then subsequently sank beneath the waves. He named this lost land Lemuria after its most famous proposed inhabitants, providing a neat and elegant solution to the puzzle of the lemurs. This theory was quickly adopted and expanded by other leading scientists of the day, including the prominent biologist Ernst Haeckel, who saw it as a potential answer to an even bigger question, the origin of humanity itself. Haeckel suggested Lemuria might be the very cradle of mankind, the place where the first humans evolved before migrating across the ancient land bridge. But just as the scientific community was beginning to settle on this idea, it was co-opted and transformed into something far more mystical. Theosophist and occultist Madame Helena Blavatsky wove Lemuria into the foundational fabric of her esoteric belief system. In her seminal work, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, she described Lemuria not as a mere land bridge for animals, but as the home of the third root race of humanity. Her Lemurians were gigantic, ape-like, and egg-laying beings with a third eye that granted them psychic powers and a connection to the spiritual world. She claimed her knowledge came from ancient pre-Atlantean texts, and in her narrative, Lemuria met a cataclysmic end through volcanic eruptions, making way for the rise of Atlantis. This spiritual reinterpretation captured the public's imagination in a way the dry scientific theory never could, turning a geological proposal into a full-blown mythological realm. The entire scientific basis for Lemuria evaporated in the mid-20th century with the widespread acceptance of the theory of plate tectonics. Scientists finally had the correct and far more spectacular explanation for those lemur fossils. India and Madagascar were indeed once connected, but not by a sunken continent. They were both part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. Over millions of years, the Indian plate broke away and drifted northward, colliding with Asia to form the Himalayas, while Madagascar remained off the coast of Africa. This slow, monumental geological dance explained the distribution of life without the need for any land to sink into the ocean. Yet the myth of Lemuria refused to die. Stripped of its scientific validity, it found a new and enduring home in New Age philosophy, alternative history, and spiritual thought. It persists as a kind of Pacific counterpart to Atlantis, a symbol of a primordial, peaceful, and spiritually advanced paradise. For many, it represents a lost golden age of psychic harmony and ancient wisdom, a concept that continues to inspire books, documentaries, and even claims of energy vortexes and crystal-powered ruins waiting to be discovered. Lemuria's story is a powerful testament to how a scientific idea, once proven false, can be reborn through myth, fulfilling a deep and enduring human need to believe in a forgotten world of wonder and wisdom. After the scientific origins of Lemuria, the legend of another sunken continent emerged not from academic journals, but from the adventurous and often controversial world of 19th-century archaeology. This is the story of Mu, a hypothetical lost land that its proponents claimed was the mother of all civilizations, a true cradle of humanity that met a watery grave in the Pacific Ocean. The myth was born from the work of Augustus Le Plongeon, a pioneering but eccentric Mayanist who traveled through the Yucatan in the late 1800s. Through his studies of Maya sites like Chichen Itza, Le Plongeon became convinced that he had decoded a hidden history. He believed that ancient Maya texts told the story of a great landmass that had sunk in the Atlantic, which he called Mu, and that Maya civilization was far older than anyone believed, even predating and influencing the cultures of Egypt and Greece. He argued that survivors from this cataclysm had fled to become the founders of other great ancient societies, weaving a global connection that mainstream archaeology simply did not see. However, it was a retired British colonel named James Churchward who truly popularized and expanded the myth of Mu into the form we recognize today. In the 1920s and 30s, Churchward published a series of books that captured the public's imagination, most notably The Lost Continent of Mu. His narrative was grand and all-encompassing. He relocated Mu from the Atlantic to the vast expanse of the Pacific, describing it as a massive continent that stretched from north of Hawaii all the way to the Fiji Islands and Easter Island. For Churchward, Mu was not just another ancient kingdom. It was the original Garden of Eden, the birthplace of humanity and the source of all world religion and science. He wrote of an advanced, idyllic civilization known as the Nokkels, a brotherhood of enlightened beings who possessed technology and spiritual wisdom far beyond our own. This paradise was supposedly home to 64 million peaceful inhabitants before its complete and utter destruction around 12,000 years ago, when cataclysmic earthquakes and volcanic eruptions tore the continent apart, sending it to the bottom of the sea in a single night. The entire foundation of Churchward's theory rested on his claim to have deciphered ancient tablets. He stated that while serving as a soldier in India, a high-ranking temple priest showed him a collection of sacred clay tablets written in an ancient, lost language called Nokkel. Churchward maintained that the priest taught him to read this language over the course of several years, and the story these tablets told was of Mu's glorious rise and tragic fall. He later claimed to have found corroborating evidence in Maya inscriptions in Mexico, which he believed told the same story. His so-called proof also included perceived cultural similarities between vastly separated civilizations, such as the presence of pyramid structures, sun worship, and flood myths in both the Old and New World. To Churchward, these parallels were not the result of independent development or complex human migration patterns, but undeniable evidence that all these cultures were the scattered children of the same mother continent. Unsurprisingly, mainstream science and archaeology have universally rejected Churchward's claims. Scholars have pointed out that no other researcher has ever seen the Nokkel tablets, and his translations of known Maya glyphs are considered pure fantasy, completely at odds with the Maya writing system that has since been successfully deciphered. The geological evidence is even more damning. Geologists confirm that there is no sunken continent in the Pacific Ocean. The seafloor there is composed of basaltic oceanic crust, which is thin, dense, and fundamentally different from the thick, buoyant granite that makes up continents. A landmass the size of Mu could not have simply sunk without leaving an immense geological trace, which simply does not exist. The real story of the Pacific is one of volcanic island chains formed by plate tectonics, not the tragic loss of a vast continent. Despite this, the myth of Mu endures. It filled a similar niche to Atlantis and Lemuria, offering a romantic and unified origin story for humanity at a time when the world felt large and disconnected. It provided a simple, elegant answer to the complex question of why different cultures share myths and architectural motifs. In many ways, Mu became the Pacific's answer to Atlantis, a symbol of a universal, ancient wisdom that was lost to human arrogance or a natural disaster. Its persistence in popular culture, from comics to conspiracy theories, speaks to our endless fascination with the idea that our collective past was more interconnected and far more advanced than conventional history allows us to believe. Far to the north, beyond the domain of the freezing north wind Boreas, ancient Greek writers spoke of a paradise untouched by sorrow, sickness, or the harshness of winter. This was Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, a civilization so idyllic it made even the fabled Golden Age seem dim by comparison. The lyric poet Pindar, writing in the 5th century BCE, described it as a place of perpetual bliss where the sun shone 24 hours a day and the inhabitants, the Hyperboreans, lived for 1,000 years in perfect peace and harmony. They were a sacred people devoted to the god Apollo, who was said to spend the winter months among them in their radiant northern home. According to legend, they knew no struggle, no war, and no old age. When they had at last enjoyed their immense lifespan to the fullest, they simply chose to end it by leaping joyfully from a cliff into the sea. The historian Herodotus also chronicled this mysterious land, though he did so with a more skeptical eye, presenting it as a real place shrouded in incredible tales. He wrote of mysterious offering straw-wrapped parcels of wheat that traveled a magical, unseen route from Hyperborea, passed from hand to hand until they finally reached the temple of Apollo at Delos. For Herodotus, this ritual gift was a tantalizing piece of evidence that pointed to a real, if remote, location. The very name Hyperborea wasn't just a flight of fancy, it was a geographical descriptor for the Greeks, who believed the world was surrounded by a great river ocean. To be beyond Boreas was to be at the very edge of the known world, a concept that left the door open for centuries of speculation and exploration. This ambiguity is precisely what gave the myth its incredible longevity, allowing it to be constantly remapped and reimagined. During the Renaissance, as cartographers began filling in the blank spaces on their maps with both known lands and legendary places, Hyperborea often appeared as a large, fertile island somewhere in the Arctic Sea. It was a standard feature on many world maps, a testament to the enduring power of classical learning. The myth took a much darker turn in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, however, when it was co-opted by various mystical and nationalist groups. Theosophists like Madame Blavatsky incorporated it into their cosmology as the home of the second root race of humanity. This esoteric interpretation was then twisted into a horrifying new form by Nazi occultists, who became obsessed with the idea of Hyperborea as the ancient homeland of the Aryan race. They funded expeditions to Tibet and the Arctic in a fanatical and utterly futile search for evidence of their lost polar utopia and the superior beings they believed had inhabited it. In the modern era, the legend has found new life not in racial pseudoscience, but in the realm of alternative history and speculation about ancient advanced civilizations. Some theorists, pointing to alleged anomalies and warm currents under the Arctic ice, suggest that the myth could be a distorted memory of a time when the Earth's axis was different and the North Pole was temperate. Others propose that the core of the legend, a land of eternal sunshine, could be describing the midnight sun of the Arctic summer, a phenomenon that would have seemed miraculous to Mediterranean cultures. The enduring appeal of Hyperborea lies in its powerful combination of opposites. It is a paradise of warmth and light imagined in the coldest, darkest part of the world. It represents humanity's enduring hope that beyond our current struggles and limitations, perhaps at the very edge of our understanding, there exists a place of perfect peace and harmony waiting to be rediscovered. While the Greeks dreamed of Hyperborea basking in Apollonian light, another northern legend emerged not from poetry but from a real and truly astonishing voyage of discovery. This is the story of Thule, a name that has echoed through the ages as the ultimate symbol of the remote and mysterious north. Its origin lies with a daring Greek explorer from Massalia, modern-day Marseille, named Pytheas. Around 320 BC, Pytheas embarked on an epic journey, sailing far beyond the familiar confines of the Mediterranean, past the Pillars of Hercules and up the Atlantic coast of Europe. His written account of this voyage on the ocean is now lost, but its contents were so incredible that they were quoted and debated by ancient historians for centuries. Pytheas spoke of reaching a land he called Thule, a 6-day sail north of Britain. His most mesmerizing description was of a place where the natural laws of the Mediterranean seemed to break down. He reported that in the summer, the sun never fully set, and the sea itself congealed into a slushy, impassable mass he called the sea lung. Modern scholars recognize this as the first recorded description of the midnight sun, and pack ice or sea ice near the Arctic Circle. Because Pytheas's original text is lost, the precise identity of his Thule has become one of history's great geographical puzzles, a mystery that has inspired over 2 millennia of debate. The most widely accepted theory places Thule somewhere in Scandinavia, likely the coast of Norway. Others argue compellingly for the Shetland or Orkney Islands, though these seem too close to Britain to fit his 6-day sailing estimate. The most romantic and compelling candidates are Iceland or even the coast of Greenland. Wherever it was, Pytheas's account established Thule not just as a place, but as an idea, the absolute limit of the known world, the final frontier before the map faded into legend. For Roman poets like Virgil, the name Ultima Thule became a poetic shorthand for a distant, barely attainable goal, a land so far away it existed on the very edge of reality. This classical concept of a far northern land was tragically reborn in the early 20th century, stripped of its exploratory wonder and twisted into something dark and occult. In 1918, a secret German occult society known as the Germain Norden was formally renamed the Thule Society. Its members, who were intensely nationalist and anti-Semitic, were fascinated by Germanic paganism and the idea of a pure Aryan race. They chose the name Thule because they believed it was not just a real place, but the ancient Arctic homeland of this superior race. For them, Thule was a Hyperborean paradise, the cradle of Aryan culture whose wisdom and power had been lost to time. The society's logo even incorporated the swastika, an ancient symbol they wrongly claimed as exclusively Aryan. This group was not a fringe curiosity. It was a gathering place for those who would later form the core of the Nazi Party. Key members included Rudolf Hess and Alfred Rosenberg, a leading Nazi ideologue. The Thule Society's publisher, Franz Eher Verlag, would even become the official publishing house of the Nazi Party. Their mystical, racist interpretation of the Thule myth provided a pseudo-historical and pseudo-spiritual foundation for the horrific policies that would follow. In the decades since the Second World War, the name Thule has slowly been scrubbed of its most malevolent associations, though the shadow of its appropriation still lingers. The myth persists in more neutral and scientific contexts. The Thule people, ancient ancestors of the modern Inuit, are a genuine prehistoric culture studied by archaeologists, named after Thule, Greenland, which itself was named by European explorers inspired by the ancient myth. The United States even established Thule Air Base in Greenland during the Cold War, a stark, modern military outpost sitting ironically in the lands once associated with ancient mystery. Today, the name still captivates those drawn to the unknown. It appears in fantasy literature, in the names of research vessels, and in the conversations of modern mystics who continue to search for a lost northern wisdom. The enduring power of Thule lies in its unique duality. It is one of the rare legends born from a credible, first-hand account of exploration, yet its exact nature remains just out of reach. It represents humanity's eternal drive to journey beyond the horizon, to put a name on the last blank spot on the map, and the sobering truth that our myths can be harnessed for both wonder and for terrible, devastating ends. Moving from the frozen realms of northern myth, we find ourselves drawn into the enchanted mists of a legend much closer to the heart of medieval Europe, the mystical island of Avalon. This is not a story of a sunken continent or a polar paradise, but a deeply personal and spiritual refuge, a place of healing and mystery woven into the very fabric of Arthurian lore. Its first written appearance comes from the quill of Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century, a time when the boundaries between history, myth, and national identity were beautifully blurred. In his History of the Kings of Britain and later in the Life of Merlin, Geoffrey paints Avalon not just as a location but as a character in its own right, an island of apples blessed with eternal fertility, a place where sickness and time itself seem to hold no power. Avalon's primary role in the legend is one of profound sanctuary. It is the place where the great sword Excalibur, the symbol of Arthur's divine right to rule and his power, was miraculously forged. More importantly, it becomes the king's final destination. After the tragic and bloody Battle of Camlan, where Arthur is mortally wounded by his traitorous son Mordred, the king does not die. Instead, he is carried away by a group of mysterious women, most notably his sister Morgan Le Fay, who is often depicted as a powerful enchantress and healer in these early tales. They take him across the water to Avalon to be healed of his grievous wounds in the hope that he might one day return in Britain's greatest hour of need. This concept of the once and future king is central to Avalon's enduring appeal. It transforms the island from a simple geographical location into a timeless, liminal space between life and death, between our world and the other world. This blending of worlds is the key to understanding Avalon's power. It is a direct inheritance from older Celtic mythology, which is rich with tales of magical islands like Anon or Tir na and Og, realms of eternal youth and beauty that exist just beyond the veil of perception, accessible only through magic or invitation. Geoffrey of Monmouth and the authors who followed him masterfully layered Christian symbolism onto this ancient pagan foundation. The result is a myth that felt both familiar and new to a medieval audience. Avalon becomes a kind of earthly paradise, a pre-Christian Eden that echoes the promised afterlife. The holy, apocryphal journey of Joseph of Arimathea to Glastonbury, bringing with him the Holy Grail, further cemented this blending, creating a potent mix of Celtic magic and Christian sanctity that made the legend irresistible. Naturally, such a compelling story has inspired a centuries-long quest to pin it to a map. The most famous and persistent candidate is Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England. This striking, solitary hill rising from the flat Somerset levels does indeed look like an island when the surrounding marshes flood. In the late 12th century, monks at Glastonbury Abbey made a spectacular announcement. They had discovered the graves of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere buried between two pyramids in their cemetery. Later, they claimed to have found a cross inscribed with the words, "Here lies buried the famous King Arthur with Guinevere, his second wife, in the Isle of Avalon." This discovery was almost certainly a clever fabrication, a fundraising effort to rebuild the abbey after a devastating fire, yet the association stuck. For many, the Tor, with its ancient terraces and its lone ruined chapel dedicated to Saint Michael, still feels like a place where the veil is thin, a fitting stand-in for the mythical isle. Other theories look further afield. Some suggest the Isle of Man, with its own rich tapestry of Celtic myths and its position in the Irish Sea. Others point to the Isle of Anglesey off the coast of Wales, a place historically known as a stronghold of the Druids. There are even proposals for locations in Brittany, France, such as the forest of Brocéliande, which is itself steeped in Arthurian legend as the home of Merlin. But the true magic of Avalon is that its physical location ultimately doesn't matter. Its power lies in its symbolism. It represents a deep, universal longing for a place of rest and restoration, a hidden haven where what is broken can be made whole and what is lost can be found again. It is the ultimate symbol of hope, the belief that our greatest heroes are not truly gone, but merely waiting in a tranquil land just out of sight, shrouded in the gentle, eternal mists. Leaving behind the mystical mists of Avalon, we travel westward to the very tip of England, to the rugged coast of Cornwall, where the land seems to forever battle the relentless sea. Here, the legend is not of a single island of healing, but of an entire kingdom lost beneath the waves, the fabled land of Lyonesse. In the sprawling tapestry of Arthurian romance, Lyonesse holds a special place as a land of chivalric splendor and heartbreaking tragedy, a realm forever tied to one of the cycle's most poignant figures, the knight Tristan. This was said to be his homeland, a prosperous and fertile territory ruled by his father, King Meliodas. The tales describe Lyonesse not as a mere island, but as a substantial tract of land that once stretched from the westernmost point of Cornwall all the way to the Isles of Scilly, some 28 miles out into the Atlantic, creating a continuous landscape of forests, towns, and fertile fields where now there is only the churning, treacherous sea known as the Celtic Deep. The most enduring story associated with this lost kingdom is, of course, the tragic romance of Tristan and Isolde. As the legend goes, Tristan, the noble son of Lyonesse's king, was sent to Ireland to escort the beautiful Isolde back to Cornwall to marry his uncle, King Mark. But a fateful potion meant for the bride and groom was mistakenly drunk by Tristan and Isolde instead, binding them in an uncontrollable, eternal love that defied all loyalty and duty. Their story of secret meetings, betrayal, and ultimate heartbreak is one of the great foundational myths of Western literature. For Lyonesse, this connection elevates it from a simple sunken land to a place of profound emotional weight, the origin point of a love so powerful it could only end in ruin, mirroring the cataclysm that would later claim the kingdom itself. The land's fate was sealed not by a single event, but by a culmination of human folly and divine wrath, with most versions of the tale blaming its destruction on a great storm or a series of earthquakes sent to punish its people for their sins, drowning its many villages and 140 churches in one terrible night. What makes the legend of Lyonesse so uniquely compelling is the strong possibility that it preserves a folk memory of a very real geological event. Unlike the purely philosophical Atlantis or the scientifically invented Lemuria, the seas between Cornwall and the Scilly Isles show clear evidence of significant land subsidence over the last several thousand years. This entire region was not always as it appears today. During the last ice age, when sea levels were dramatically lower due to vast quantities of water being locked in glaciers, the Celtic sea shelf was largely exposed. The area between Land's End and the Scilly Isles would have been a low-lying, habitable plain, likely dotted with freshwater lakes and river valleys. As the glaciers melted and sea levels began to rise around 12,000 years ago, this land would have been gradually inundated. The process was slow but relentless, and it is entirely plausible that the final stages of this flooding, perhaps accelerated by a major storm surge or a localized seismic event, could have wiped out the last remaining settlements, creating the perfect foundation for a legend of a kingdom swallowed by the sea. This theory is powerfully supported by local folklore, which is rich with tangible, haunting references to the lost land. For generations, Cornish fishermen have told stories of pulling up pieces of weathered wood and stone from the seafloor that looked unnervingly like window frames or sections of wall. There are persistent tales of glimpsing the outlines of field boundaries and stone fences through the clear water on exceptionally calm days. But the most evocative and spine-tingling claim is one that has been passed down for centuries, that during a powerful storm, when the wind howls and the waves crash with particular fury, one can still hear the deep, mournful sound of church bells ringing from beneath the sea, a phantom peal for the drowned parishes of Lyonesse. These stories are not just idle superstition. They are a form of oral history, a way for a coastal community to make sense of the physical evidence they encountered daily and to process the very real and ever-present danger of the encroaching ocean. Modern archaeology and geology continue to add fascinating layers to this legend. Sonar mapping of the seabed in the area has indeed revealed a submerged landscape, complete with what appear to be river channels and flat-topped granite outcrops that could be mistaken for the ruins of buildings. While these are natural formations, their appearance is striking and feeds directly into the narrative. The Baiae boat grave, an archaeological find on one of the Scilly Isles, provides evidence of continuous human habitation in the area for thousands of years, proving that people were indeed there to witness the rising seas and the changing coastline. Lyonesse, therefore, occupies a rare and powerful space in the world of myth. It is a story born at the intersection of epic literature and observable reality, a romantic tragedy woven around a kernel of geological truth. It serves as a permanent, poetic reminder of the fragile relationship between land and sea, and of the countless human stories that have been erased by the relentless march of time and tide. From the drowned fields of Lyonesse, we cross the English Channel to the coast of Brittany, where the sea whispers a different kind of cautionary tale, one not of gradual geological change, but of a single, catastrophic night of divine retribution. This is the legend of Wise, the most beautiful and morally corrupt city in the world, whose spectacular downfall serves as a stark warning against hubris and sin. The story centers on the conflicted figure of King Gradlon the Great, a pious and just ruler who founded the magnificent city of Wise as a gift for his beloved yet deeply spoiled daughter Dahat. To protect his creation from the ever-present threat of the ocean, he commissioned a phenomenal feat of engineering, a massive system of dikes and a single, gigantic sea gate. The only key to this gate, which held back the entire Atlantic, was kept on a chain around Gradlon's own neck, a symbol of his ultimate responsibility and the fragile barrier between civilization and chaos. Within these impregnable walls, Wise prospered beyond imagination. Its buildings were adorned with precious jewels, its streets were paved with gold, and its citizens enjoyed every luxury imaginable. But this material wealth came at a profound spiritual cost. Under the influence of Princess Dahat, the city descended into a whirlwind of hedonism and decadence. The tales describe a court given over to endless parties, pagan rituals, and every manner of sin. Dahat herself is often portrayed as a wild and seductive figure, sometimes said to take a new lover each night, only to have him mysteriously vanish by morning, dragged into the sea. The city that was built as a paradise had become, in the eyes of the church, a new Sodom or Gomorrah, a den of iniquity that cried out for punishment. The climax of the myth is a masterful blend of human weakness and supernatural intervention. One night, a devastating storm lashed the Breton coast, and a handsome, mysterious knight in red appeared at the city gates seeking shelter. He was, according to most versions, the devil himself in disguise. He charmed the rebellious Dahat, who, in a fit of passion or perhaps as part of a wicked bargain, stole the key from around her sleeping father's neck. Throwing open the massive sea gate, she unleashed the pent-up fury of the ocean upon the city. As the icy waters began to flood the streets, King Gradlon awoke to the chaos. Seized with terror, he mounted his trusty horse and fought through the rising waves, grabbing his daughter at the last moment to carry her to safety. But as they fled, a heavenly voice boomed over the tempest, declaring that Gradlon could only be saved if he cast aside the sinner who had caused the destruction. In a heart-wrenching moment of choice between paternal love and divine will, the king pushed his own daughter into the raging waters. She vanished beneath the waves, and as she did, the sea immediately began to recede, leaving Gradlon alone and broken on the safe shore, forever haunted by the price of his salvation. Like the story of Lyoness, the myth of Wise is powerfully intertwined with the very real and terrifying experience of coastal living. Brittany's coastline is low-lying and has been subject to significant flooding throughout history. The legend likely preserves a collective memory of a major inundation event, perhaps a perfect storm or a tsunami that wiped out a prosperous settlement. The city of Douarnenez, near which Wise is said to lie, sits on a bay that local tradition claims was once dry land. The specific detail of the sea gate and dike system is particularly telling. It reflects an ancient and ongoing human struggle to defend precious land from the sea, a battle that many communities in the region would have understood intimately. The myth gave a moral and narrative structure to a random, terrifying natural disaster, transforming it from a senseless tragedy into a story with a clear lesson about the consequences of sin. This lesson ensured the legend's survival and its deep cultural resonance. For medieval Breton clergy, the story of Wise was a perfect parable about the dangers of worldly temptation and the absolute necessity of obedience to God's will. It was a tool for evangelization, a vivid and frightening story used to reinforce church doctrine, but its power transcended the pulpit. The tragic, complex figure of Dahut has fascinated artists for centuries, transforming from a simple symbol of vice into a more nuanced and sometimes sympathetic character. Composers like Edouard Lolo in his opera Le Roi d'Is and artists across various mediums have been drawn to the drama and pathos of her story. In modern retellings, she is often reimagined as a proto-feminist icon, a woman rebelling against a repressive patriarchal and religious order whose punishment was disproportionately severe for her crimes of passion and freedom. This enduring fascination speaks to the legend's depth. It is more than a simple fable about good and evil. It is a human story about a father's impossible choice, a daughter's rebellion, and the devastating cost of both love and piety, forever echoing in the sound of the waves crashing on the shores of Brittany. While the cautionary tale of Wise warns of royal pride and a daughter's sin, another legend from across the Celtic world speaks of a tragedy born from a far more common and relatable human failing: simple negligence. This is the story of cantre'r, the fabled Lowland Hundred, a vast and fertile kingdom said to lie submerged beneath the waters of Cardigan Bay off the coast of Wales. Unlike the jeweled splendor of Wise, cantre'r is remembered as a land of pastoral abundance, a rich plain of 16 cities protected from the sea by an intricate system of dikes and sluice gates. This sophisticated network of defenses was the kingdom's lifeline, holding back the Irish Sea and allowing its people to farm some of the most productive land in all of Wales. The system required constant, vigilant maintenance, a duty entrusted to 2 watchmen who held the solemn responsibility of ensuring the gates were closed at high tide. The legend's enduring power comes from its heartbreakingly simple catalyst for disaster. One of these watchmen was a man named Zealandia, who is almost universally portrayed not as a malicious figure, but as a tragically flawed one. He was a well-known lover of drink and merriment, a character whose personal weaknesses would lead to unimaginable consequences. On one fateful night, a great storm gathered force out at sea, coinciding with a lavish feast held by the kingdom's ruler, King Gwyddno Garanhir. As the party reached its peak, Zealandia, who was meant to be standing watch, succumbed to his revelry. Whether he was too drunk to remember his duty or simply too distracted by the celebrations, he failed to close the massive sluice gates. With its primary defense left wide open, the kingdom was utterly vulnerable to the storm surge. The sea rushed in with unstoppable force, inundating the entire low-lying plain and drowning the cities, fields, and people of cantre'r in a single, catastrophic event. What makes this myth so poignant is the visceral detail that has survived in folklore. It is said that in the immediate aftermath of the flood, the only figure left standing was a lone, distraught watchman. Perhaps Zealandia himself, sobered by the horrific results of his failure, sitting in his watchtower as the waves swirled below him. The legend even provides a specific, haunting soundscape for the tragedy. Some versions claim that the bells of the drowned churches can still be heard ringing mournfully beneath the waves on a quiet day, an elegy echoed in the lioness myth. Another tradition holds that if you listen closely from the shore, you can hear the desperate cry of the last official who realized what was happening, a man named Tethrin, who reportedly ran along the dikes shouting, "The sea is coming. The sea is coming, beware the sea." His warning, of course, came far too late. As with Lioness, the story of cantre'r is compelling because it aligns so well with observable geography and archaeology. Cardigan Bay is a large, shallow inlet, and its history of coastal change is well documented. At the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower, a significant amount of land would have been exposed here. As the glaciers melted and seas rose, this area would have been gradually reclaimed by the ocean. The submerged forest phenomenon is not a myth at all, it is a geological fact. At very low tides, particularly after winter storms have scoured away the sand, the remains of ancient peat bogs, tree trunks, and root systems are regularly exposed on the beach between Unislas and Borth. These stumps, some of which have been radiocarbon dated to around 4,500 years old, are the physical remains of a real prehistoric landscape that was indeed swallowed by the sea. Furthermore, archaeological investigations in the area have uncovered human footprints preserved in the ancient peat, along with tools and the remains of pathways, providing tangible proof that people lived and walked on this land before it was lost to the waves. The story of cantre'r also fits into a much broader, global pattern of flood myths, yet it stands apart in its specific focus. While tales like the biblical Noah or the Mesopotamian Utnapishtim involve world-ending deluges sent by gods to punish humanity for its wickedness, the Welsh legend is strikingly local and human scale. The flood is not a divine reset of all creation, but a specific tragedy caused by one man's mistake. This makes it a powerful folk explanation for an observable natural phenomenon, the slowly drowning coastline, and a memorable moral lesson about the critical importance of communal responsibility and the dire consequences of failing in one's duty. It's a story that would have resonated deeply with coastal and river-dwelling communities for whom the maintenance of dikes and seawalls was a matter of life and death. Cantre'r is not a myth of gods and heroes, but of farmers and watchmen, a sobering reminder that sometimes the greatest catastrophes can begin with the smallest, most human of errors. Leaving behind the storm-lashed coasts of Celtic legend, we now journey thousands of years back in time and far to the east, to the sun-drenched lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, in the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians and Babylonians dreamed not of a world lost to the sea, but of a pristine paradise that was the very opposite of their harsh, muddy reality. This was Dilmun, a sacred land described in some of the oldest writings in the world as a place of breathtaking purity and peace. In the poetic hymns of the ancient Sumerians, Dilmun was portrayed as a virginal, untouched realm. It was a land where the raven could not caw, where the lion did not kill, and the wolf did not snatch the lambs. Most incredibly, it was a place where old age and disease were utterly unknown, and where people lived in a state of blissful, eternal health. This vision of a land free from suffering and decay was deeply intertwined with its physical description. The Sumerian myth Enki and Ninhursag paints a picture of a place that was pure, clean, and bright, but initially without one crucial element: fresh water. The great god Enki orders Utu, the sun god, to bring fresh water up from the earth, transforming Dilmun into a lush, fertile garden. This act of divine irrigation summons forth 8 magical plants, which Enki then proceeds to eat, leading to a series of events that ultimately result in the creation of healing deities. This story solidifies Dilmun's primary identity not just as a paradise, but as a source of life, health, and divine healing power, a stark contrast to the struggles of daily life in Mesopotamia. Dilmun's most famous appearance, however, comes in the world's first great epic poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh. After his failed quest for immortality following the death of his friend Enkidu, a heartbroken Gilgamesh journeys to the ends of the earth in a final, desperate attempt to cheat death. His destination is the faraway land of Dilmun, for it is here that the only mortal to have been granted eternal life by the gods is said to reside, Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah. Utnapishtim and his wife were the sole human survivors of the gods' great flood, saved because he was righteous and built a boat to preserve the seed of all living things. As a reward for his piety, the god Enlil granted the couple immortality and a home at the mouth of the rivers in the distant, blessed land of Dilmun. Gilgamesh finds this immortal couple living in serene seclusion, and it is from Utnapishtim that he learns the definitive truth that eternal life for ordinary humans is an impossibility, a secret held only by the gods. In this context, Dilmun is more than a paradise. It is the ultimate reward, a retirement home for the righteous, a place set apart from the mortal world where the exception to the rule of death quietly resides. The power of the Dilmun myth is that it almost certainly has its roots in a very real and prosperous place. For decades, scholars have largely agreed that the land described in these ancient texts corresponds to the modern-day Bahrain archipelago and the adjacent coast of eastern Saudi Arabia. The evidence is both archaeological and textual. Ancient Mesopotamian inscriptions repeatedly mention Dilmun as a crucial trading partner, a maritime hub that connected the advanced civilizations of the Indus Valley, known as Meluha, with those of Mesopotamia. Archaeological excavations on Bahrain have uncovered vast burial mounds, the remains of a major central settlement, and most tellingly, seals and weights that match the standard described in cuneiform texts for Dilmunite merchants. This was not a mythical, inaccessible paradise. It was a real-world economic powerhouse. So how did a bustling center of commerce become mythologized as a pristine land of the gods? The answer likely lies in its geography and the perspective of the Mesopotamians themselves. For a people living in a flat, riverine landscape of silt and mud, the journey across the sea to Dilmun would have been an extraordinary voyage. The sight of Bahrain's freshwater springs bubbling up from the seafloor, a phenomenon still visible today, would have seemed nothing short of miraculous. The lush greenery sustained by these springs, set against the backdrop of the azure Persian Gulf, would have appeared as a veritable garden. Furthermore, its role as a neutral trading port, a place where goods and cultures mingled peacefully, may have contributed to its reputation as a land without conflict. Dilmun, therefore, represents a fascinating fusion of reality and idealization. It was a real place that, through the lens of myth and from the perspective of distant admirers, was transformed into a symbol of everything their own world was not. A pure, peaceful, and blessed sanctuary, forever immortalized in humanity's earliest stories. Leaving behind the sunken kingdoms and earthly paradises of the West, we now turn our gaze towards the towering, snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, home to one of the most profound and enduring legends of a hidden world, the mystical kingdom of Shambhala. This is not a story of a land lost to catastrophe, but of a realm deliberately concealed, a spiritual fortress waiting for its moment to reveal itself. Rooted deeply in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly within the ancient Kalachakra Tantra texts, Shambhala is described as a hidden valley kingdom, a circular land surrounded by a ring of impassable mountains. It is a place of ultimate peace and harmony, where the inhabitants are all enlightened beings living free from suffering, poverty, and old age. The society is governed by a lineage of righteous kings, and its capital, Kalapa, is said to be a magnificent city filled with libraries of sacred wisdom and palaces made of gold and jewels. Unlike the myths of Atlantis or Lemuria, which speak of a past glory, the legend of Shambhala is fundamentally oriented toward the future. It serves as a beacon of hope and a call to spiritual action. Buddhist teachings prophesy that the world will eventually descend into a dark age of rampant greed, violence, and spiritual decay, known as the Kali Yuga. It is at this moment of utmost darkness that the forces of negativity will rise up and march to conquer the world. According to the prophecy, the 25th king of Shambhala, a ruler named Rudra Kakrin, meaning the wrathful one with the wheel, will emerge from secrecy at the head of a vast righteous army. They will engage in a final cosmic battle against the dark forces, utterly destroying them and ushering in a new golden age of peace and enlightenment for all humanity. Therefore, Shambhala is not merely a refuge, it is a repository of the world's highest spiritual knowledge preserved in perfect form, destined to intervene and save civilization at its lowest ebb. The path to this hidden kingdom is not one that can be found on any map. Access is granted not through physical travel but through spiritual purification. The texts state emphatically that only those with pure karma and a highly advanced spiritual practice can perceive the way to Shambhala. For everyone else, the mountain passes remain invisible, appearing as sheer rock walls. This makes the quest for Shambhala an internal journey as much as an external one, a metaphor for the Buddhist path to enlightenment itself. The kingdom exists simultaneously as a physical place on earth believed by many lamas to be located somewhere in the vast, unexplored regions of Central Asia, and as a spiritual state of mind, a pure land that can be realized through profound meditation. This beautiful duality is central to its enduring power. It is both a tangible hope and an intangible ideal. This potent blend of spiritual promise and hidden geography proved irresistibly attractive to the Western world when it was introduced by European explorers and occultists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The myth was eagerly adopted and dramatically reinterpreted by the Theosophical Society, particularly by its founder, Helena Blavatsky. She wove Shambhala into her complex cosmology as the home of the Great White Brotherhood, a secret society of ascended masters who are guiding humanity's spiritual evolution from behind the scenes. This theosophical interpretation, which stripped Shambhala of its specific Buddhist context and recast it as a universal esoteric headquarters, captured the imagination of numerous other mystical and spiritualist movements across Europe. Tragically, this romanticized version of the myth took a dark and dangerous turn when it was absorbed by the Nazi regime. SS Chief Heinrich Himmler, a fanatic obsessed with occultism and the origins of the Aryan race, became convinced that Shambhala was not a Buddhist paradise but the ancient homeland of a superior white race. He believed its masters held the key to unimaginable power, including the secret of the vril energy, a supposed supernatural force. This belief directly inspired the notorious Nazi expeditions to Tibet between 1938 and 1939, led by zoologist Ernst Scheffer. While the expedition's public goal was scientific, its true, occult-driven mission was to search for physical evidence of Shambhala, to trace the migratory routes of the Aryan race, and to make contact with the kingdom's supposed masters. The Nazis sought to pervert a spiritual prophecy of peace into a weapon for their own brutal ideology, a chilling chapter in the history of how sacred myths can be horrifically misappropriated. Despite these Western distortions, the myth of Shambhala remains vibrantly alive and deeply significant within Tibetan Buddhist practice. For centuries, masters have written guidebooks called Lamyik, detailing the spiritual journey to its borders. It is a central subject of meditation, a symbol of the enlightened mind that exists within all beings, waiting to be discovered. The current Dalai Lama has frequently taught that we can all help to build a Shambhala in our own hearts and communities by cultivating compassion, wisdom, and courage in the face of the world's darkness. The kingdom's enduring appeal lies in this powerful dual promise that there is a literal, physical sanctuary where the highest wisdom is kept safe from the ravages of time, and simultaneously that this sacred realm is a mirror reflecting our own highest potential, a state of being we can each strive to realize right now. From the spiritual sanctuary of Shambhala, we now venture into the dense jungles and misty highlands of South America, where the quest for material wealth sparked one of history's most relentless and destructive pursuits. This is the legend of El Dorado, a tale that began not with a city of gold, but with a man literally gilded from head to toe. The origins of this myth are rooted in the very real traditions of the Muisca people, a powerful confederation of tribes inhabiting the highlands of modern-day Colombia. Their accession ritual for a new king, or Zipa, was a spectacle of breathtaking opulence and spiritual significance. The ruler-elect would be taken to the sacred Lake Guatavita, a deep, circular body of water nestled in the mountains. There, he would be stripped of his clothing and covered entirely in a sticky resin before being dusted with fine gold particles, transforming him into a living, breathing golden idol, the El Dorado meaning the Golden One. This gilded king, accompanied by 4 high priests, would then embark on a ceremonial raft loaded with vast quantities of gold artifacts and emeralds as offerings to the gods. As the raft reached the center of the lake, the air thick with incense and chanting, the new king would dive into the icy, dark waters, washing the gold from his body as an offering to the deities below. The treasures were then cast into the lake after him, a magnificent sacrifice to ensure the prosperity and fertility of his reign. This was not a story of a hoard of wealth to be claimed, but a profound act of religious devotion and a public demonstration of the ruler's connection to the divine. For the Muisca, gold held a spiritual, not a monetary value. It was the sweat of the sun, a sacred metal meant for the gods, not for commerce. When the first Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 16th century, they heard fragments of this ritual from captured natives. But through a process of mistranslation, cultural misunderstanding, and sheer avaricious hope, the story was warped beyond recognition. The Spanish, whose entire ambition in the New World was fueled by a desperate hunger for gold, could not conceive of a culture that would simply throw such wealth away. They heard the story of the Golden Man and inferred the existence of the place he must have come from. So began the incredible evolution of the myth. First, it was a single golden man, then it became a city built entirely of gold, and finally, it grew into an entire empire dripping with precious metal, ruled by a king who powdered his body with gold dust every morning. This fantastical kingdom was said to be located in the deepest, most unexplored reaches of the continent, perhaps hidden in the Amazon rainforest or nestled high in the Andes. This ever-shifting mirage of wealth ignited a century of frantic and devastating exploration. German conquistadors like Nicolaus Federmann scoured the Venezuelan lowlands. Francisco de Orellana became the first European to navigate the entire length of the Amazon River, driven by rumors of golden kingdoms on its banks. The most famous quest was led by Gonzalo Pizarro in 1541, a disastrous expedition that saw hundreds of men perish in the nightmarish jungle in search of the land of cinnamon and the golden city of El Dorado that lay beyond it. Perhaps the most tragic figure was the Englishman Sir Walter Raleigh, who mounted 2 expensive expeditions to Guyana in the late 1590s and early 1600s. He became utterly obsessed, staking his reputation and fortune on finding the golden city he called Manoa, which he believed lay on the shores of a vast lake. He even published an extravagant book, The Discovery of Guyana, filled with elaborate descriptions of a city whose emperor was richer than any European monarch, in a desperate attempt to secure more funding from a skeptical Queen Elizabeth. His failure and eventual execution were a direct result of his unwavering and ultimately fatal belief in the legend. The tangible focus of these searches often centered on the very place where the myth began, Lake Guatavita. Recognizing the kernel of truth in the tales, numerous attempts were made to drain the lake and recover its supposed treasure. The first major effort was in the 16th century, when Spanish merchants cut a notch in the crater's rim to lower the water level. They recovered a few hundred gold pieces, but the tunnel collapsed and killed many workers. The most ambitious attempt came in the early 20th century, when a British company fully drained the lake using a tunnel. They managed to retrieve a significant number of artifacts, including gold pendants and ceramics, from the thick mud at the bottom, but the costs of the operation far exceeded the value of the find. The lake, like the myth itself, promised far more than it ever yielded. The true legacy of El Dorado is not one of discovery, but of tragedy and exploitation. The relentless search for this phantom city drove the mapping of vast swaths of South America, but it also led to the enslavement, torture, and massacre of countless indigenous people who were coerced into guiding the Spanish or were punished for not revealing a secret they did not possess. The myth served as a powerful justification for the ruthless plunder of the continent. In the end, El Dorado was never a place to be found on a map. It was a powerful idea, a symbol of the ultimate prize that drove men to madness and shaped the course of history. It represents the dark side of exploration, where dreams of infinite wealth blind us to the very real cultures and people right in front of us, and where a sacred ritual can be twisted into a hollow fantasy that consumes everything in its path. While the legend of El Dorado was a shimmering mirage born from cultural misunderstanding, the quest for another legendary city of gold was fueled by a far more tangible and heartbreaking historical event: the fall of the mighty Inca Empire. This is the story of Paititi, a legend not of a man made of gold, but of a final, desperate sanctuary for a vanquished civilization. As the Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, systematically dismantled the Inca state in the 16th century, they captured the emperor Atahualpa, and despite receiving a historic ransom of gold and silver, a room filled to the ceiling, they executed him anyway. This act of betrayal sent a clear and terrifying message to the surviving Inca nobility. The invaders could not be trusted, and their insatiable appetite for precious metal would never be quenched. In response, the remnants of the royal court and army made a strategic retreat deep into the impenetrable cloud forests on the eastern slopes of the Andes. From their last stronghold of Vilcabamba, they waged a guerrilla war against the Spanish for nearly 40 years. It is from this period of resistance that the most compelling versions of the Paititi myth emerged. The story goes that to save their remaining cultural and religious treasures from the plunderers, the Incas undertook a secret and monumental effort to transport their vast remaining wealth, golden idols, ritual vessels, and the exquisite craftsmanship of a great empire, to a hidden city far beyond the reach of the Spanish. This refuge was called Paititi, a place rumored to be even richer than the capital of Cusco, concealed in a remote valley where the Andes meet the vast Amazon rainforest. Unlike the largely invented El Dorado, Paititi represented something real, the last hope of a people fighting for their survival and the preservation of their world. The search for this lost refuge has consumed explorers and archaeologists for centuries, often blurring the lines between myth and history. For a long time, the last Inca capital of Vilcabamba was itself considered a legend, the mythical Paititi. This changed in the 1960s when the American explorer Jean Savoy identified the ruins of Espiritu Pampa as the actual Vilcabamba. This was a monumental discovery, proving the historical basis of the Inca resistance. Yet the finding of the real last city only intensified the search for the legendary one. Many researchers now believe that if Paititi exists, it is not Vilcabamba itself, but another, even more remote site deeper in the jungle, perhaps a religious sanctuary or a secret storehouse never found by the Spanish. Modern expeditions continue to be drawn to the Peruvian Amazon, armed with ever more sophisticated technology. Satellite imagery, LiDAR scanning, and drone surveys have revealed the stunning scale of pre-Columbian development in a region long thought to be pristine wilderness, identifying numerous previously unknown settlements and complex road systems. These discoveries prove that the eastern Andes were far more densely populated and integrated into the Inca sphere than previously believed, lending credence to the idea that a significant urban center could indeed be hidden there. Notable figures like the Peruvian explorer Carlos Nuanchwanda spent decades following ancient trails and indigenous oral histories, while the controversial French explorer Thierry Jamin has mounted several highly publicized expeditions based on local accounts and geographic formations that resemble Incan architecture. The true power of the Paititi legend today lies in its symbolic weight. It represents the ultimate archaeological cold case, a puzzle with a potential kernel of truth waiting to be solved. It speaks to the enduring mystery of the Amazon, a place that still guards its secrets fiercely. Most importantly, it keeps alive the memory of the Inca resistance, a story of a culture that refused to be entirely erased and which may have succeeded, at least for a time, in keeping its most sacred treasures out of the hands of the conquerors. Whether a city of gold awaits discovery or simply the ruins of a final outpost, the dream of Paititi ensures that the world continues to look into those deep green valleys, wondering what last remnants of a great empire might still be waiting there, shrouded in mist and silence. Crossing from the lush jungles of South America to the arid landscapes of the north, the Spanish obsession with gold found a new focus in a legend that would dramatically alter the map of the continent. This is the myth of the 7 cities of gold, a tale that promised not just one El Dorado, but 7 magnificent metropolises overflowing with riches, all waiting to be claimed for the Spanish crown. The origins of this story are a fascinating blend of Moorish history, Christian folklore, and desperate hope. It began not in the New World, but on the Iberian Peninsula during the 8th century. As Muslim forces conquered the Visigothic Christian kingdom of Hispania, a powerful legend emerged that 7 Catholic bishops, fearing for their lives and their holy relics, had fled the invasion. Taking to the sea, they sailed west into the vast, unknown Atlantic Ocean, each eventually founding his own magnificent city on a distant, undiscovered shore. These were not just any cities, they were said to be realms of staggering wealth and piety, where the streets were paved with gold and the citizens lived in splendor, free from the persecution they had left behind. This medieval European myth was violently yanked into the realm of supposed reality by the shipwreck of a Spanish conquistador. In 1536, a vessel carrying Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca and 3 other survivors of a failed expedition to Florida washed ashore on the coast of modern-day Texas. For 8 incredible years, these men lived as slaves, traders, and faith healers, journeying on foot across the American Southwest. When they finally stumbled into a Spanish outpost in Mexico in 1536, their tales of the lands they had seen were met with breathless excitement. Cabeza de Vaca himself spoke cautiously of hearing rumors from native peoples of permanent settlements with large buildings to the north. However, one of his companions, an enslaved Moroccan man named Estevanico, reportedly amplified these stories, perhaps seeking favor with the viceroy. He spoke of grand cities whose doorways were adorned with turquoise and whose wealth was beyond imagining. The Spanish authorities, their minds already filled with the legend of the 7 bishops, made an instantaneous and fateful connection. These rumored pueblos must be the legendary 7 cities of Cibola. The man tasked with claiming this prize was Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, a young and ambitious governor. In 1540, he assembled the most elaborate and well-equipped expedition the continent had yet seen. Funded by massive loans and fueled by dreams of glory, his force was a small army, over 300 Spanish conquistadors, more than 1,000 indigenous Mexican allies, hundreds of pack animals, and great herds of cattle and sheep. They marched north from Compostela in a glittering procession of polished armor and bright banners, a vision of European power moving into the unknown. Guided by the now ubiquitous Estevanico, who was sent ahead as a scout, the expedition's hopes soared when the Moroccan sent back a specific message: he had found Cibola. He described it as a city so large it would make Mexico City look small. The signal he sent to confirm the discovery was a cross the size of a man's hand, a small, cautious gesture that his Spanish masters interpreted as a sign of immeasurable wealth. What Coronado and his exhausted, starving men finally found after months of grueling travel was a devastating anticlimax. Instead of a golden metropolis, they stood before Hylik, a fortified pueblo village of multi-storied mud brick dwellings. To the eyes of the Spaniards, conditioned to see gold in every sunset, it was a dismal, impoverished sight. Coronado himself, in a crushing report to the viceroy, called it a little, crowded village. When the Zuni people rightly defended their home from this armed invasion, the Spanish easily stormed the walls, but found only stores of corn, beans, and some welcome, though mundane, supplies. There was no gold. The only treasure of any note was the turquoise common in Zuni jewelry. Estevanico, it turned out, had been killed at Hylik, likely for his arrogant demands for treasure and women. The great cross he had sent was not a measure of wealth, but probably a warning of danger that went utterly unheeded. Despite this shattering disappointment, the myth proved too powerful to abandon immediately. Coronado spent the next 2 years fruitlessly scouring the deserts, canyons, and plains of the American Southwest, chasing ever more elusive whispers. His expedition became a journey of increasingly fantastical hearsay. He heard of a wealthy land called Quivira far to the east, a story that led him on a desperate trek across the endless Texas panhandle and into Kansas, only to find a village of thatched huts belonging to the Wichita people. Another tale spoke of a province where the natives sailed the rivers in giant canoes with golden eagles on their prows and used golden bowls for their meals. This turned out to be the simple, utilitarian copper culture of the Great Lakes region. With each failure, the legend mutated, always placing the treasure just over the next horizon. Coronado finally returned to Mexico in 1542, bankrupt, disgraced, and broken in health, his expedition a colossal financial and human failure. Yet the legacy of this futile quest for the 7 cities was profound and lasting. While Coronado found no gold, his expedition was the first detailed European exploration of the American Southwest. His scribes produced invaluable accounts and the first European descriptions of the Grand Canyon, the vast buffalo herds of the plains, and the complex cultures of the Pueblo people. The maps drawn from his journey opened the door for further Spanish colonization, mission building, and eventual settlement in the region. The myth itself, however, had a darker consequence. It cemented a European perception of North America's native peoples, not as civilizations with their own rich cultures, but as obstacles or potential guides to hidden wealth. The Pueblo communities, with their sophisticated multi-story architecture and settled agricultural life, were dismissed as impoverished savages because they lacked precious metals. The failure to find Cibola did not end the search for easy wealth. It simply displaced it, ensuring that the next generation of explorers would pour their energies into different legends, forever chasing a golden mirage that always seemed to vanish just as they drew near. Venturing from the sun-scorched plains of North America, we journey now to the vast and timeless deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, where the shifting sands guard the secret of one of Islam's most powerful moral parables, the lost city of Iram of the Pillars. This legendary metropolis, often called the Atlantis of the Sands, represents a profound divergence from the quests for gold or hidden sanctuaries we've explored thus far. Its story is not one of tragic error or hopeful refuge, but of divine retribution for overwhelming arrogance. The primary source of the tale is the Quran in Surah Al-Fajr, which briefly but hauntingly references a people known as the Ad and their magnificent capital, Iram. They were a tribe of giants blessed with immense strength and prosperity, who built a city of unparalleled splendor. According to the holy text, they erected towering pillars and magnificent structures, a testament to their power and architectural genius. Yet this greatness was their undoing. They grew utterly corrupt, turning away from the one God to worship idols, and they oppressed the weak with brutal tyranny. Despite repeated warnings from their prophet, Hud, they mocked his message and continued in their wickedness, their pride becoming a fortress against faith itself. Their punishment was as absolute as it was terrifying. The Quran describes how God sent a devastating, screaming wind to scour the city for 7 nights and 8 days, a divinely ordained sandstorm of apocalyptic fury. This was not a natural disaster, it was an instrument of judgment. The sand itself became a liquid tomb, swallowing the soaring pillars, the grand palaces, and every last inhabitant until the entire magnificent city was erased from the earth, buried forever beneath the dunes. The silence that followed was eternal. The story concludes with a chilling verse, the like of which had never been created in the land. This phrase serves a dual purpose. It speaks to the city's unique grandeur in life and to the absolute, unprecedented totality of its destruction. Iram was made an example for all future generations, a stark reminder that no earthly power, no matter how formidable, can stand against divine will when it is fueled by hubris and injustice. For centuries, Iram existed solely as a powerful theological lesson, a mythical city whose physical reality was beside the point. Its power was in its message. That changed in the early 20th century when the tale captured the imagination of the famous British explorer and writer T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. It was he who first coined the romantic moniker, the Atlantis of the Sands, and the name stuck, transforming Iram from a purely spiritual allegory into the ultimate geographical puzzle, a place that daring adventurers and archaeologists felt could actually be found. The search was fueled by a combination of Bedouin oral traditions, which spoke of a lost city of the Ad tribe, and the accounts of early geographers like Ptolemy, who had marked a place called Yuba on his ancient maps of Arabia. Many researchers began to suspect that Yuba and Iram were one and the same, a real city whose catastrophic fate had been immortalized in the Quran. The breakthrough came not from a lone explorer on a camel, but from the marriage of ancient texts with space-age technology. In the 1980s, a team led by British explorer Sir Ranulph Fiennes and archaeologist Joris Zarins embarked on a quest to find Yuba. Their strategy was ingenious. They began by painstakingly mapping the ancient frankincense trade routes, reasoning that any major city would have been a hub for this incredibly valuable commodity. Then they turned to NASA. Using satellite radar imagery, they scanned the deserts of southern Oman, searching for geological anomalies invisible to the naked eye. The technology could effectively see through the sand to identify ancient tracks and paths worn into the bedrock by centuries of caravan traffic. Just as they had hoped, all these ghost roads revealed by the satellites converged on a single point in the empty quarter, a place called Shisar. Excavations at Shisar in the early 1990s revealed the remains of a large, octagonal fortress city with towering walls and a massive central well. The most startling discovery was that a large section of the city had not simply been abandoned, it had collapsed into a massive sinkhole. The ground beneath it, a limestone cavern, had given way, swallowing much of the settlement. For the archaeologists, this was the likely kernel of truth behind the legend. A catastrophic geological event, a sinkhole opening suddenly, would have been interpreted as the earth swallowing the city whole. The sandstorms that followed would have quickly buried the ruins, sealing its fate and giving rise to the story of a city punished and erased by a desert storm. The evidence fit. Shisar was a major caravanserai on the frankincense route. It had met a sudden and dramatic end, and its location matched the descriptions of Yuba. The discovery of this site created a fascinating dialogue between faith, legend, and science. For some, it was proof that the Quranic story of Aram was based on a real historical event. For others, the connection remains tenuous. The ruins at Shisar, while significant, do not match the description of a city of unimaginable pillars and towers, and its timeline is later than that of the Ad people. Yet the power of the myth is undiminished. Whether Shisar is the literal Aram or simply a city that shared a similar fate, its story serves the same eternal purpose. Aram of the Pillars endures as one of history's most potent cautionary tales. It is a universal narrative about the dangers of arrogance, the corruption that absolute power can bring, and the fragile nature of human achievement when it is divorced from humility and justice. It reminds us that the desert, like the sea, is a powerful force that can both conceal the evidence of our civilizations and preserve the moral lessons of their fall for millennia. As the myth of Aram served as a solemn warning from the deserts, a very different kind of legend was taking root in the courts and monasteries of medieval Europe, one not of divine punishment but of glorious hope and deliverance. This was the fabulously wealthy and powerful Christian kingdom of Prester John, a mythical priest-king believed to rule a realm of unimaginable wonders somewhere in the distant east, beyond the lands controlled by Islam. The legend first crystallized around the year 1165, when a mysterious letter, purportedly written by Prester John himself, began circulating among the rulers and bishops of Europe. Addressed to the Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos and the Pope, this document was no simple greeting. It was a breathtaking account of a kingdom that defied all known logic and geography. Prester John described himself as the supreme ruler of a vast Christian empire, claiming descent from one of the three magi and asserting that his wealth and piety outstripped that of any monarch on earth. The contents of this letter were designed to astonish and captivate the medieval mind. It painted a picture of a utopia overflowing with natural marvels and magical artifacts. His palace was said to be made of gold and precious gems, its gates of sardonyx and its courtyard paved with crystal. The kingdom contained the fountain of youth, whose waters restored youth and vitality to anyone who drank from them. It was home to peculiar races of people, including men with horns and eyes on their shoulders, and giants who fought alongside cyclopes. Perhaps most fantastically, it described a mystical gem called the Stone of Virtue, which could render a person completely invisible, a powerful metaphor for a hidden kingdom waiting to be revealed. This was not just a travelogue of wonders, it was a political and religious manifesto. Prester John presented himself as a devout Nestorian Christian, a mighty warrior king who had recently won a great victory over the Muslim Persians and Medes. He spoke of his desire to come to the aid of his European brethren, to visit the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and to join forces to crush the Islamic powers that stood between them. This letter, though almost certainly a clever European forgery, arrived at a moment of profound crisis and longing. Western Europe was reeling from the failures of the Second Crusade, and the dream of a powerful Christian ally materializing from the rear of the Islamic world was intoxicating. It offered a strategic fantasy that could reverse the fortunes of Christendom. The myth of Prester John became a potent ideological weapon, a symbol of the hope that they were not alone in their struggle, that a mighty emperor-priest was out there, ready to launch a pincer movement that would encircle and defeat their common enemy. This belief was so powerful that it directly influenced real-world geopolitics and exploration for centuries. Pope Alexander III even sent a personal physician as an envoy to find Prester John, though the man vanished without a trace, becoming just another casualty of the legend's powerful allure. As European knowledge of actual Asian geography expanded through the travels of men like Marco Polo and William of Rubruck, the elusive kingdom refused to be pinned down. Explorers returned with fascinating accounts of Christian communities in the East, such as the Nestorians in the Mongol Empire, but none could locate the specific, magnificent court of Prester John. Consequently, the legend did not die, it simply migrated. When it became clear that no such kingdom existed in Asia, European cartographers and mythmakers seamlessly moved it to the last great unexplored region on their maps, Africa. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Prester John's domain was consistently depicted in the mysterious highlands of Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. Here, the myth found a new and surprisingly durable home, as Ethiopia was indeed an ancient and isolated Christian kingdom surrounded by Muslim territories. Portuguese explorers like Pero de Covilhã were explicitly sent to find Prester John's court in Africa, and their contact with the Ethiopian Empire, ruled by its negus or king, seemed to finally confirm the legend's truth, even if the reality was far less fantastical than the stories. The enduring power of the Prester John myth lies in what it reveals about the medieval European psyche. It was a perfect projection of their deepest hopes and fears, the hope for a divine ally in their holy war, the fear of being isolated and surrounded by powerful non-Christian empires, and an insatiable curiosity about the unknown world. The legend functioned as a vast canvas onto which Europeans could project their ideal of the perfect Christian ruler, immensely powerful, unimaginably wealthy, yet also a pious priest, combining spiritual and temporal authority in one perfect figure. It was a compelling narrative that drove exploration, shaped diplomacy, and persisted for over 500 years because it answered a fundamental human need to believe that somewhere beyond the horizon, a better, more just, and more miraculous world was possible, waiting to be discovered and to come to our aid in our time of greatest need. While the desert sands of Arabia may have concealed the cautionary tale of Iram, the vast ocean of dunes that is the Sahara holds a different kind of legend, one not of divine wrath, but of a sleeping enchantment waiting to be broken. This is the myth of Zerzura, the White City or the Oasis of Little Birds, a fabled ruin whispered about in medieval Arabic texts like the 15th century treasure hunter's guide, Kitab al-Kanaz. The stories described it as a city of ghostly white buildings, its doors carved with mysterious figures, abandoned and filled with untold treasure. But its most captivating feature was its guardians, not hostile warriors, but a king and queen and their entire court, locked in an enchanted sleep from which they could not be awakened. The city was said to be hidden in a remote wadi, an emerald-green oasis bursting with life, accessible only to the bravest and most determined of travelers who could find their way through the trackless desert. This enchanting legend, a blend of a fairy tale and a treasure map, lay dormant for centuries until it was rediscovered and revitalized by a new generation of adventurers in the early 20th century. For European explorers and soldiers stationed in North Africa after the First World War, the story of Zerzura became an irresistible siren call. It offered more than just potential riches. It represented the ultimate prize in the new era of desert exploration, a tangible goal in a landscape that was still largely blank on maps. The search was taken up not by lone eccentrics, but by a cadre of sophisticated, well-equipped men who became known as the Zerzura Club. This informal group included figures like the Hungarian Count Laszlo Olmosy, who would later be romanticized as the English patient, the British diplomat and desert enthusiast Ralph Bagnold, and the dedicated explorer Patrick Clayton. What makes the quest for Zerzura truly unique is that while the city itself remained elusive, the search for it yielded monumental practical achievements. The members of the Zerzura Club were pioneers of modern desert exploration. Frustrated by the limitations of traditional camel caravans, they turned to a new technology, the automobile. They modified Ford Model Ts and other early vehicles to withstand the brutal conditions of the Libyan desert, installing special low-pressure tires to navigate soft sand and developing new techniques for driving across immense dunes. Ralph Bagnold, in particular, used his engineering background to create new tools for desert navigation, including the sun compass, which was unaffected by the metal of the cars and became an indispensable tool for crossing featureless terrain. Their expeditions, funded by a mix of personal wealth, geographical societies, and the hope of finding Zealandia, were responsible for mapping vast, unknown regions of the Sahara, identifying previously unknown oases, and correcting serious errors on existing maps. The mystery of Zealandia's possible location narrowed to a specific area known as the Gilf Kebir, a massive plateaued rock formation in a remote corner of the Egyptian-Libyan borderland. This stark, beautiful, and incredibly harsh landscape became the focus of intense exploration throughout the 1920s and 30s. It was here that Almasi and his colleagues made some of the most significant discoveries, though not of a white city. In 1933, Almasi discovered the famous Cave of Swimmers in the Wadi Sara, with its ancient rock art depicting figures seemingly swimming in what was once a verdant paradise. This was a breathtaking find that proved the Sahara had not always been a desert, but it was not Zealandia. Other explorers found chains of hidden valleys and smaller oases, any one of which could have been the inspiration for the legend. So, what was the origin of the Zealandia story? Most experts now believe the myth is a classic example of a wandering tale, a story attached to a real but elusive geographical feature. The Oasis of Little Birds was likely a poetic name for a remote and exceptionally fertile wadi, a secret haven for migratory birds and perhaps a temporary home for nomadic tribes. Such places do exist in the deep desert, appearing and disappearing with the shifting water tables. A particularly bountiful oasis discovered by a lucky traveler and then lost again to the sands could easily have spawned generations of stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. The sleeping giants are a common folkloric motif, a magical explanation for why a place of such obvious abundance was not permanently inhabited. The treasure was the life-giving water and date palms themselves, which to a parched and weary desert traveler would indeed have seemed more valuable than gold. In the end, the true legacy of Zealandia is not a discovered ruin, but a demonstrated human capacity for turning myth into tangible progress. The dream of a white city hidden in the sands directly drove the development of the techniques, technology, and sheer grit that would define 20th century exploration. The members of the Zealandia Club went on to apply their hard-won knowledge during the Second World War in the North African campaigns, with Bagnold founding the legendary Long-Range Desert Group. The myth proved that a powerful story can be a catalyst for real-world discovery, even if the discovery is not the one originally sought. Zealandia remains out there, not as a physical city to be found on a map, but as a permanent symbol of the Sahara's deepest secrets, a reminder that the desert's greatest treasure is often the journey of seeking itself and the knowledge gained along the way. While the Sahara's Zealandia offered a dream of hidden treasure guarded by sleeping kings, another legend from the opposite side of the Indian Ocean speaks of an entire continent lost to the sea, a catastrophe so profound it is said to have erased the very cradle of all human civilization. This is the myth of Kumari Kandam, a sunken land that holds a place of immense cultural and emotional significance in Tamil mythology, often described as a vast continent that once connected southern India to Sri Lanka, stretching further south to Madagascar and even Australia. Unlike many lost world myths that originated in ancient texts, the concept of Kumari Kandam as a lost continent is a relatively modern construction, emerging with powerful force during the Tamil cultural revival and nationalist movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. The story draws upon much older Tamil literary traditions, particularly the Sangam literature, which poets described as being composed in a distant, mythical past across two vast academies. Legend held that the first of these academies, along with vast territories of ancient Pandyan kings, were swallowed by the advancing ocean, a recurring theme of loss that provided the fertile ground for the later continental theory. The man most responsible for popularizing this modern interpretation was a visionary Tamil revivalist named Devanya Pavana. In the mid-20th century, he and other scholars began to weave these ancient poetic fragments of lost land with then-current scientific hypotheses, like the since-disproven Lemuria, to form a powerful new narrative. They proposed that Cymru Kingdom was not just a lost Pandean kingdom, but the original homeland of all humankind, the birthplace of the world's first language and civilization. In this telling, the Tamil people were the progenitors of all human culture, and their magnificent continent, the seat of unparalleled knowledge and advancement, was destroyed in a series of catastrophic inundations. This theory served a potent political and cultural purpose during a period of rising Tamil nationalism, providing a glorious and ancient pedigree that could stand against the dominant narratives of Sanskrit-based North Indian history. It positioned the Tamils as the original, superior civilization, whose legacy had been fragmented and diminished by geological tragedy rather than historical or cultural failure. The geological basis for this myth, however, is where the story meets the hard wall of scientific reality. The concept of a sunken continent connecting India to Australia is a clear echo of the 19th century Lemuria hypothesis, which was itself entirely debunked by the acceptance of plate tectonics. Geologists confirm that the Indian ocean floor is composed of dense basaltic rock, fundamentally different from the buoyant granite that forms continents. There is no mechanism by which an entire continent could sink without leaving a massive geological trace, such as a submerged mountain range or a distinct continental plate, and no such evidence exists. The region does, however, have a dynamic history of sea level change. During the last glacial maximum, when vast amounts of water were locked in polar ice caps, global sea levels were over 120 meters lower than they are today. This would have exposed a significant land bridge between India and Sri Lanka and extended the southern coast of India considerably. The gradual melting of the glaciers and the subsequent rise in sea levels from roughly 15,000 to 5,000 years ago would have slowly inundated these low-lying coastal plains, displacing human settlements and forever drowning their land. This very real process of post-glacial flooding provides the likely historical kernel for the myth, a collective memory of a lost coastline that was later dramatically expanded into the legend of a sunken continent. Despite its scientific implausibility, to dismiss Cymru Kingdom as a mere fantasy is to miss its profound cultural resonance. For many Tamils, the legend is not a literal geological history but a powerful metaphor for loss, resilience, and identity. It symbolizes a golden age of Tamil culture, language, and achievement, a time of pure and undiluted greatness that was catastrophically interrupted. The ocean that swallowed the land becomes a symbol of the various historical forces, invasions, political domination, cultural assimilation, that have threatened Tamil distinctiveness over the millennia. The myth thus functions as a foundational narrative of survival, affirming that although their ancient homeland may be gone, the Tamil people and their language have endured against all odds. It is a story that provides deep cultural pride and a sense of historical depth that rivals any other ancient civilization. In literature, art, and political discourse, Cymru Kingdom remains a potent symbol, a testament to the power of myth to shape identity and offer a vision of primordial glory that continues to inspire and unite a people, regardless of its footing in the realm of empirical science. Moving from the sunken continent of Cymru Kingdom, we turn our attention to a legendary city whose story is not one of hypothetical landmasses, but of a divine metropolis whose physical remains may actually lie beneath the waves. This is the story of Dwarka, the magnificent western kingdom of the Hindu god Krishna, a city of myth that has become the focus of a fascinating and ongoing archaeological investigation. The primary source for its grandeur comes from the ancient epic, the Mahabharata, and the later Harivamsa, which describe it in breathtaking detail. According to these texts, Krishna, a central deity in Hinduism, established his capital on the western coast of India. The city was said to be a marvel of celestial architecture, protected by massive walls and entered through a series of imposing gates. Its most staggering feature was the sheer scale of its opulence. The texts claim it contained 900,000 palaces, all constructed from silver and gold and adorned with precious emeralds. Dwarka was more than just a wealthy city. It was a fortress of righteousness and a symbol of Krishna's earthly power, a thriving hub of commerce and culture that was the envy of the world. The city's fate is as dramatic as its description. After a great war and the culmination of Krishna's divine purpose on earth, the scriptures describe a cataclysmic event. The age or yuga was ending, and with Krishna's departure from the world, the ocean is said to have risen up and swallowed his entire city in a single, overwhelming deluge. The Mahabharata recounts how the sea rushed into the streets, submerging the golden palaces and leaving no trace of the glorious capital behind. This narrative serves a profound theological purpose, marking the end of an era and reinforcing the transient nature of even the most powerful earthly kingdoms when their divine purpose is fulfilled. For centuries, Dwarka existed in the realm of sacred literature, a powerful symbol of loss and the cyclical nature of time in Hindu philosophy. The modern chapter of this ancient tale began in the early 1960s when an Indian archaeologist named Dr. S.R. Rao decided to investigate the possibility that the legend held a kernel of historical truth. Working off the coast of the modern city of Dwarka in Gujarat, his team began a systematic exploration of the seabed. What they began to uncover was nothing short of extraordinary. Scattered across the ocean floor, they found the remains of large stone structures, walls, pillars, and fortifications clearly shaped by human hands. Further excavations and dives revealed a veritable treasure trove of artifacts, including stone anchors, pottery shards, and even bronze and stone sculptures. Perhaps most compellingly, they discovered a seal with an image that closely resembled the one described in ancient texts as belonging to the city of Dwarka. The most significant finds were made at a depth that suggested a very old date for their submergence, pointing to a time that could align with the traditional chronology of the Mahabharata. These discoveries ignited a passionate debate that continues to this day. For many devout Hindus and some researchers, these underwater ruins are incontrovertible proof of the historical city of Lord Krishna. They see the alignment between the archaeological finds and the descriptions in the ancient texts as too close to be coincidental, arguing that science is finally validating what faith has always held to be true. The Indian government's National Institute of Oceanography has continued this work, using advanced technologies like side-scan sonar and sub-bottom profiling to map the submerged structures. Their surveys have revealed a large, complex settlement layout on the seabed, including what appears to be a fallen stone wall and the foundations of a massive fort, adding further fuel to the argument that this was a major urban center, not just a small fishing village. However, the mainstream archaeological community urges a more cautious interpretation. Skeptics and many academics point out that while the underwater structures are undoubtedly real and significant, directly linking them to the mythical city of Krishna presents challenges. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts from the site has yielded a range of dates, with many clustering around the 2nd millennium BC, a period that does not perfectly align with the traditional timeline for Krishna's life as described in the epics. Furthermore, the northwest coast of India has a long and rich history of maritime trade. The sunken structures off modern Dwarka could very well be the remains of a much later, but still ancient port city that was lost to coastal erosion or a localized seismic event, a common occurrence in a geologically active region. It is entirely possible that the memory of this very real sunken port was absorbed into the older, grander mythology of Krishna's divine capital over centuries of oral storytelling. The true significance of the sunken city off Dwarka may lie in a synthesis of these two perspectives. Whether the stones on the seabed are the literal walls of Krishna's palace or the wharves of a later prosperous port, their discovery has created a powerful bridge between myth and history. They prove that the coastline of India was home to sophisticated, ancient maritime civilizations capable of building substantial stone settlements, and that cataclysmic flooding events did indeed erase parts of that history from the map. The ongoing exploration serves as a captivating reminder that our oldest stories often contain echoes of real events, distorted and magnified by time and belief into something truly legendary. The search for Dwarka is more than an archaeological dig. It is a quest to understand how human memory, faith, and the relentless power of the sea intertwine to create the enduring myths that define a culture. Crossing the Channel from the drowned lowlands of Brittany and Wales, we find another profound legend of loss, this one tied to the very separation of Britain from the mainland of Europe. This is the story of El Lyonesse, a lost land not of a kingdom, but of an entire geographical connection. French folklore, particularly in the region of Brittany, speaks of the sunken forest of Lyon, a vast and fertile territory said to have once stretched from the modern coast of France all the way to the British Isles. This was not imagined as a narrow land bridge, but as a thriving, populated plain, a continuous landscape of forests and fields that allowed for easy passage and communication between the two landmasses before it was catastrophically flooded by the sea. The most enduring tale associated with this loss is the tragic story of the City of Wise, which we explored earlier, but the broader legend of the land itself persists independently. Medieval texts and local folklore are rich with echoes of this event. They speak of a time when one could walk from France to England without getting one's feet wet, and of church bells that can still be heard ringing mournfully from beneath the waves, a common motif in sunken land myths that signifies the drowning of human communities and their places of worship. These stories were not mere fantasy, they served as a powerful folk explanation for the very existence of the English Channel, a formidable body of water that became a defining feature of British identity and history. What makes this myth so compelling is the stunning degree to which it aligns with actual geological history. This legend is a spectacular example of a folk memory preserving a very real, catastrophic event. During the last ice age, with so much of the planet's water locked up in massive glaciers, sea levels were dramatically lower. What is now the North Sea and the English Channel was a vast low-lying basin known to geologists as Doggerland. This was not a barren tundra, but a rich and habitable plain of hills, rivers, forests, and lagoons, teeming with life like deer, aurochs, and mammoths. For thousands of years, it was inhabited by Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who tracked game across its expanse and established seasonal camps. The end of this world came not with a single cataclysm, but with a two-pronged assault. First, as the glaciers melted, sea levels began a steady, inexorable rise, slowly encroaching on the low-lying land. Then, around 6200 BC, a truly catastrophic event occurred. A massive submarine landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a devastating tsunami that ripped across the Doggerland plain. Wave after wave, possibly as high as a modern 5-story building, would have scoured the landscape, wiping out any communities in its path and dramatically accelerating the flooding process. Within a relatively short period, geologically speaking, the sea completed its victory and the last remnants of the land connection were severed, leaving Britain an island. The stories of the lost land of Lyon, passed down for generations before being recorded in the medieval period, almost certainly contain a distorted memory of this monumental event. The sudden, terrifying influx of water caused by the Storegga tsunami would have been seared into the collective consciousness of the survivors, a trauma so profound it became woven into the foundational myths of the cultures that descended from them. The legend serves as both a warning and an explanation. It warns of the awesome and unpredictable power of the sea, a vital lesson for any coastal community. And it explains a dramatic feature of the landscape, the channel itself providing a narrative for why the world looks the way it does, and why the people on the other side of the water, who were once neighbors, became separated. But not all lost cities are born from ancient myth or geological memory. Some are shockingly recent, their demise meticulously documented and their ruins lying in plain sight, yet they generate legends just as powerful as any tale of Atlantis. This brings us to the remarkable and sobering story of Port Royal, Jamaica, a place where history and mythology collided with cataclysmic force on one fateful morning in 1692. Unlike the whispered legends of older civilizations, Port Royal's story is one of recorded history, a bustling, vibrant city that was the economic heartbeat of the 17th century Caribbean, only to be erased from the map in a matter of minutes. Its transformation from the richest and wickedest city in the New World to a submerged archaeological site is a drama that needs no embellishment. Yet its sudden end was so biblically proportioned that it instantly spawned its own enduring mythos of divine retribution. To understand the impact of its fall, one must first appreciate its spectacular rise. By the late 1600s, Port Royal was not just a successful port, it was a phenomenon. Nestled on a narrow sand spit at the end of the Palisadoes, guarding the entrance to Kingston Harbor, it was the perfect base for both legitimate trade and outright piracy. It became the unofficial capital of the English Caribbean, a bustling, chaotic melting pot where vast wealth changed hands with dizzying speed. Merchant ships unloaded silks, spices, and slaves, while the taverns and brothels were packed with pirates, most notably the infamous Henry Morgan, who spent their plundered Spanish gold as quickly as they stole it. The city was a fortress of stone buildings and brick warehouses, its streets crowded with sailors, merchants, artisans, and slaves, all drawn by the promise of fortune. With a reputation for immense wealth and even greater debauchery, it earned the nickname the wickedest city on earth, a den of vice where the pursuit of pleasure was the primary occupation for many of its inhabitants. This perception of rampant sinfulness is the crucial backdrop to the tragedy that followed. On the 7th of June, 1692, just before noon, the earth began to convulse. A massive earthquake, now estimated to have been a magnitude 7.5 or higher, struck without warning. The sand spit on which the city was built underwent a process called liquefaction, where the solid ground instantly turned into a churning, watery quicksand. Brick buildings and stone walls lost their foundation, slumping and collapsing into the suddenly fluid earth. Then, as the ground shook, a series of massive tsunami waves surged into the harbor, washing over the collapsing ruins. When the tremors finally ceased, roughly two-thirds of the city had simply vanished, swallowed by the sea. Over 2,000 people were killed instantly, and thousands more perished from injuries and disease in the aftermath. The most valuable part of the city, including the heart of its commercial district, now lay under 30 feet of water. The immediacy and totality of the destruction were so profound that survivors and observers across the Atlantic world could only interpret it through one lens: the wrath of God. Preachers in Jamaica, London, and Boston seized upon the event as a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah, a direct and unmistakable punishment for the city's well-documented sins of greed, piracy, and lechery. Pamphlets and sermons spread the story like wildfire, detailing tales of sinners being swallowed mid-transgression and of the one pious man in town who was miraculously spared. This narrative of divine judgment became the dominant explanation for the disaster, firmly embedding Port Royal in the tradition of mythical cities punished for their hubris. The fact that the earthquake struck on a Tuesday, a traditional day for hedonistic festivities in the city, only cemented this interpretation in the public imagination. Yet, beneath this layer of moralizing myth lies an even more compelling truth. The very event that destroyed Port Royal also created one of the most extraordinary time capsules in the history of archaeology. The rapid subsidence and the layers of silt and sand that covered the city had a remarkable preserving effect, sealing the ruins in an anaerobic environment that prevented organic materials from decaying. This is where the legends of trapped air bubbles preserving entire rooms intact originated, a tantalizing idea that, while not entirely accurate in a literal sense, speaks to the incredible state of preservation. Since the 1950s, underwater archaeologists have been meticulously excavating the sunken city, and their findings provide an unparalleled, snapshot frozen view of 17th century colonial life. They have uncovered buildings still standing with their walls intact, cellars filled with everyday objects, pewter plates, wine bottles, clay pipes, and even the remains of meals. They found a watch that stopped at the very moment the earthquake struck, a heartbreakingly personal artifact that marks the exact time of the catastrophe. This archaeological work has done more than just satisfy historical curiosity. It has demythologized the city while simultaneously deepening its fascination. We now know that Port Royal was not simply a lawless pirate haven. It was a complex, functioning British colonial city with a sophisticated social structure. Excavations have revealed the shops of goldsmiths and silversmiths, apothecaries, and a diverse range of craftspeople. The material culture shows a society that was both wealthy and attempting to replicate the genteel lifestyles of England, even on the edge of a turbulent frontier. The discovery has provided an incredible level of detail about global trade networks, military architecture, and daily life that simply doesn't exist for any other site from this period. So, Port Royal stands at a unique crossroads. It is a historically verified sunken city, its destruction a matter of precise seismic record. Yet it is also a powerful modern myth, a story we tell ourselves about the dangers of excess and the perceived link between morality and disaster. It serves as a stark reminder that the line between history and legend is often porous. A single, well-documented cataclysm can instantly generate a mythological framework to explain the unexplainable, transforming a real city of stone and mortar into a timeless cautionary tale. The enduring power of Port Royal lies in this dual identity, a real place where we can touch the past through archaeology, and a legendary symbol of how quickly the earth can open up and swallow a world we thought was permanent. But what if the very ground beneath our feet holds a secret more astonishing than any legend? We now turn from the tales spun by human imagination to a story written in stone and water, a narrative where science and myth converge in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Zealandia, Earth's eighth and most elusive continent. Unlike the sunken worlds of Plato or Blavatsky, Zealandia is not a myth. It is a profound geological reality, a continental fragment almost entirely claimed by the Pacific Ocean. Spanning nearly 5 million square kilometers, it is a landmass larger than India, yet 94% of it lies submerged beneath the waves, with only its highest mountain peaks, the islands of New Zealand and New Caledonia, remaining visible to the world. Its existence, confirmed by geologists only in the last few decades, forces us to reconsider what a continent truly is and ignites our imagination about the hidden histories our planet conceals. The scientific saga of Zealandia's discovery is a fascinating detective story that unfolded over centuries. For a long time, New Zealand and the scattered islands around it were considered mere oceanic curiosities, isolated landforms with no connection to a larger whole. The first clues emerged in the 1990s as satellite technology began to map the Earth's gravity field with incredible precision. These maps revealed something startling. The seafloor around New Zealand was not the thin, dense basalt typical of ocean basins, but a much thicker, buoyant crust, geologically identical to the granite that forms the familiar continents above water. This was the outline of something massive. In 2017, after decades of mounting evidence from seafloor drilling and seismic surveys, a team of geologists made the formal declaration. Zealandia was not just a collection of islands, but a coherent, distinct continental slab that had pulled away from the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana around 85 million years ago. Its submergence was a slow, majestic tragedy of geologic time, as the continental crust stretched, thinned, and gradually sank, a process that took millions of years rather than a single cataclysmic day and night. This modern scientific revelation finds a powerful and poignant echo in the ancient oral traditions of the Maori people, the indigenous Polynesian settlers of Aotearoa or New Zealand. Their stories are filled with references to lands that were lost to the sea, suggesting a deep cultural memory of a different coastline. One of the most significant traditions is that of the ancestor Kupe, a great navigator who, according to legend, discovered Aotearoa while pursuing a giant octopus across the Pacific. Some tribal histories speak of lands like Hawaiki Nui, a traditional homeland, or other territories that were once connected or more accessible before subsiding beneath the waves. The story of the sinking of the land of Wangakina, or East Cape, is a specific example where a village and its inhabitants were said to have been drowned following a powerful earthquake. While these traditions are not a direct record of Zealandia's geological subsidence, which occurred long before humans arrived, they represent a profound metaphorical and spiritual understanding of the land's instability. They speak to the experience of a people intimately connected to the ocean, who have witnessed firsthand the dramatic changes that earthquakes, tsunamis, and erosion can wreak upon the coastline, forever shaping their worldview around the concept of land that can be given and taken by the sea. The existence of Zealandia, this mostly hidden continent, fundamentally blurs the line between the legendary and the real. It acts as a scientific bridge, demonstrating that the concept of a sunken land is not pure fantasy. While Atlantis may be an allegory and Lemuria a scientific error, Zealandia is tangible proof that vast habitable territories can indeed vanish beneath the ocean. This revelation sparks thrilling questions for archaeologists and anthropologists. If Zealandia had more exposed land during the lower sea levels of the last ice age, could it have been settled earlier than we currently believe? Did other groups of people whose stories are completely lost to history traverse its now submerged plains and river valleys? The search for evidence is incredibly challenging, requiring underwater archaeology in some of the most treacherous and deep waters on the planet. But the possibility that human history on this continent could be far older and more complex than our current records show is an intoxicating prospect. Ultimately, Zealandia stands as a majestic, silent giant, a continent hiding in plain sight. It challenges us to expand our definition of what constitutes a lost world, moving beyond the realm of pure myth and into the domain of verifiable planetary history. It shows us that our Earth is not a static stage but a dynamic, ever-changing entity, its map constantly being redrawn by titanic geological forces. The story of Zealandia is perhaps the most compelling of all because it is a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not inventions of our imagination, but realities waiting patiently beneath the waves for science and story to finally find them. But sometimes the line between myth and history is not drawn by imaginative storytellers, but by the brutal, unyielding force of nature itself. This brings us to a lost city that is not a legend in the traditional sense, but a historical reality whose catastrophic demise and subsequent disappearance were so absolute that it itself became the stuff of myth. We are speaking of Helike, a powerful and prosperous Greek city-state that vanished in a single, terrifying night in 373 BCE, an event that echoes through time not just for its sheer destructive power, but for its tantalizing connection to the greatest lost world story of them all. On a winter night in 373 BC, the citizens of Helike, a prominent member of the Achaean League located in the northern Peloponnese, had no warning of the fate about to befall them. The city was a revered religious center dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, and its patron. In a cruel and ironic twist of fate, the god was about to demonstrate his power in the most devastating way possible. Ancient historians like the Greek writer Pausanias and the Roman authors Strabo and Diodorus Siculus recorded the event. They described how, for 5 days prior, animals and insects fled the city in a mass exodus, a well-documented precursor to seismic activity that the citizens tragically failed to recognize. Then the earthquake struck. The ground convulsed violently, shattering buildings and toppling statues, but the horror did not end there. The quake triggered a powerful tsunami, a massive wave from the Corinthian Gulf that rushed inland, submerging the shattered city and drowning any survivors. By morning, Helike was gone. Where a bustling polis once stood, there was only a saltwater lagoon. The city and its inhabitants had been utterly erased from the map. The aftermath of the disaster sent a shockwave of superstitious terror throughout the Greek world. Many saw the event not as a random natural disaster, but as a direct act of divine punishment. The most common story held that Helike had angered Poseidon by refusing to surrender a famous statue of the god to representatives from the Ionian city of Priene, who claimed it was rightfully theirs. Alternatively, some said the Helicans had violated the sanctity of suppliants who had sought refuge at the temple of Poseidon. Whatever the specific transgression, the message was clear. The god of earthquakes had used his power to annihilate his own worshippers for their arrogance and impiety. This narrative of divine retribution for hubris became the official explanation, transforming a geological event into a powerful moral lesson that would be told and retold for centuries. Now consider the timeline. The destruction of Helike occurred in 373 BCE. The philosopher Plato wrote his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, which contain the first and only detailed accounts of Atlantis, around 360 BCE, a mere decade or so later. Plato was a well-traveled and deeply intellectual Athenian who would have been in his 50s when Helike was destroyed. The event would have been the subject of intense discussion and horror throughout the Greek world. A recent and well-documented catastrophe where an advanced and powerful city was swallowed by the sea in one day and night of earthquakes and floods. The parallels are too striking to ignore. Many scholars argue that the fate of Helike must have served as a direct contemporary inspiration for Plato's description of Atlantis's downfall. He took a real, terrifying event that was fresh in the cultural memory and elevated it into a grand philosophical allegory about the fate of nations. Helike was the historical kernel, Atlantis was the mythologized lesson. For centuries after its disappearance, Helike became a destination for curious travelers. The writer Pausanias, touring Greece in the 2nd century CE, reported that the ruins of the city were still visible underwater, and that fishermen would sometimes snag their nets on the bronze statue of Poseidon that remained standing in the submerged agora. But as the centuries passed, the coastline changed. Silt from nearby rivers filled in the lagoon, burying the ruins beneath solid ground and obscuring its location completely. By the modern era, Helike had joined Atlantis and Troy as one of archaeology's great lost cities, a tangible place that had simply vanished from the face of the earth. The search for Helike captivated scholars for over 2,000 years. Countless theories placed it in various locations along the Corinthian Gulf. The breakthrough finally came in the late 1980s when two Greek archaeologists, Dora Katsanopoulou and Stephen Soter, began a systematic, multidisciplinary search. They combined close readings of the ancient texts with geological core sampling and magnetometer surveys, searching for signs of human habitation beneath the rich agricultural plain. Their persistence paid off in 2001. They discovered the remains of Helike not underwater, but buried beneath several meters of silt and clay in a location that perfectly matched the ancient descriptions. The excavations revealed a heartbreakingly intact snapshot of a classical Greek city frozen in its moment of destruction. They found collapsed buildings, pottery still sitting where it had fallen from shelves, and bronze coins datable to the exact year of the catastrophe. Most poignantly, they uncovered the skeleton of a man who had been crushed while trying to flee, a human face to the ancient tragedy. The rediscovery of Helike was a monumental achievement, proving that sometimes the most compelling myths are not fantasies at all, but forgotten histories waiting for the right moment to reveal their truth. Beyond solving a 2,000-year-old mystery, the ongoing excavation of Helike has provided an unparalleled window into classical Greek life. Unlike many ancient cities that were built over repeatedly for centuries, Helike was a single-period site, preserved in a pristine state by the very disaster that destroyed it. Archaeologists have been able to map its streets, study its unique harborworks, and examine everyday objects exactly as they were left, offering an incredibly clear and undisturbed view of a 4th century BC city. This has provided invaluable insights into Greek urban planning, trade networks, and domestic life, free from the contamination of later settlements. The story of Helike, therefore, completes a fascinating circle. It began as a real city, was transformed by its dramatic end into a cautionary myth that may have inspired the greatest lost world story ever told, and has now been returned to the realm of history by the spade of the archaeologist. It stands as the ultimate testament to how a single, catastrophic event can ripple through time, first as a terrifying reality, then as a powerful legend, and finally as a rediscovered chapter of our shared human past. While the story of Helike shows us how a single city's fate can inspire legend, some of the most profound lost worlds are not the stuff of myth at all, but geographical realities whose existence fundamentally shaped the course of human history. This brings us to a land that was never adorned with golden palaces or ruled by a sleeping king, but whose impact is written into the very DNA of 2 continents. We are speaking of Beringia, the vast, vanished land bridge that once connected Asia to North America, a realm lost not to divine wrath but to the inexorable rise of the seas. Unlike the mythical continents we've explored, Beringia's existence is a geological fact, a missing piece of the planetary puzzle whose story is etched into the seabed of the Bering Strait and the ancient memory of its descendants. During the peak of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago, the world was a dramatically different place. So much of the planet's water was locked up in colossal ice sheets that global sea levels plummeted, exposing vast areas of the continental shelf that are now submerged. In the far north, this drop of over 100 meters created a breathtakingly immense landscape. Beringia was not merely a narrow strip of land. It was a subcontinent in its own right, stretching over 1,000 miles from north to south and forming a continuous, habitable bridge between what is now Siberia and Alaska. This was no barren, frozen wasteland. Because so much moisture was trapped in ice, the climate was actually cold and dry, creating a unique ecosystem known as a mammoth steppe, a vast grassy plain that supported a stunning array of megafauna, including woolly mammoths, steppe bison, giant short-faced bears, and scimitar cats. For centuries, this rich, low-lying plain provided a pathway not just for animals, but for the most consequential travelers in human history, the first people to set foot in the Americas. The migration across Beringia was not a single, purposeful expedition, but a gradual process of exploration and settlement that likely unfolded over millennia. As small bands of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers from Siberia tracked herds of game animals eastward, they would have found themselves in a gradually expanding new world. They were not crossing a bridge in the modern sense, but simply moving across a continuous landscape, following the resources that sustained them. With no concept of continents, they were simply exploring their own familiar environment, an environment that happened to span from one side of the world to the other. Over generations, these groups moved ever eastward and southward, eventually populating the entire Americas. When the ice sheets finally began to retreat and sea levels started to rise around 14,000 years ago, the process of isolation began. The land bridge slowly narrowed, becoming increasingly swampy and eventually succumbing to the rising Pacific and Arctic oceans. By about 11,000 years ago, the connection was completely severed, leaving the descendants of those first migrants isolated in their new world, their point of origin now vanished beneath the waves. The Bering Strait was born, and the two hemispheres were separated once more. This profound geological event, the drowning of an entire world that was home to their ancestors, almost certainly echoes in the rich tapestry of flood myths found among indigenous cultures across the Americas. From the Haida on the Pacific Northwest coast to the Inuit in the Arctic and tribes deep into South America, stories abound of a great deluge that changed the world. While these narratives are diverse and deeply cultural, a common thread often involves a time when the land was different, when animals and people could walk across to other places, and a time of catastrophic flooding that separated communities and drowned the old world. These are not literal records of the slow inundation of Beringia, but they are powerful cultural memories that likely preserve the trauma and the reality of a rapidly changing coastline, of hunting grounds lost to the sea, and of a time when the geography of the world was fundamentally different. The loss of Beringia was a slow-motion catastrophe witnessed by hundreds of generations, an event so monumental it could not help but be woven into the foundational stories of the peoples whose very existence it made possible. For a long time, Beringia was just a theoretical land bridge, a necessary geographical hypothesis to explain the peopling of the Americas. But modern science has brought this lost world back to life in stunning detail. Geologists have mapped its ancient river systems and coastlines using sonar and core samples extracted from the seafloor. Paleontologists have studied the preserved remains of its incredible fauna, from mammoth tusks to the bones of giant beavers. Botanists have analyzed ancient pollen trapped in sediment to reconstruct the vegetation of the mammoth steppe, and archaeologists continue to search for direct evidence of the human presence on the now submerged plain, a challenging task that holds the potential to reveal campfires and tools left by the very first pioneers. Each discovery adds a new layer to our understanding, transforming Beringia from a blank space on a map into a vibrant prehistoric ecosystem. It stands as a powerful testament to the fact that our planet's history is one of constant change, where continents can be connected and separated by the awesome power of climate, and where the most significant journeys in human history can take place across lands that now exist only in memory, science, and the deep, abiding stories of the people who once called them home. From the frozen passage of Beringia, we now travel to the sun-drenched Bay of Naples, to a place where myth and history don't just echo each other, they are literally submerged together. This is the story of Baiae, a city whose fate is perhaps the most tangible and visually stunning of all, a real-world Atlantis where you can swim through the dining rooms of emperors. Unlike cities erased by a single cataclysmic wave, Baiae met its end through a far slower, more insidious process, one that has preserved its grandeur for us to witness today. In its heyday, Baiae was the most glamorous and notorious resort town of the ancient Roman world, a place where the elite came to indulge in every pleasure imaginable. The Roman statesman Seneca famously condemned it as a vortex of luxury and a harbor of vice, a reputation that would later make its dramatic descent beneath the waves feel like a fitting, moral conclusion written by the gods themselves. The city's incredible luxury was fueled by its unique geology. Baiae was built directly atop the Campi Flegrae, or the Phlegrean Fields, a vast and restless volcanic caldera. This volatile ground was the source of its appeal. Natural hot springs bubbled up everywhere, feeding elaborate public baths and private villas with supposedly therapeutic waters. Emperors like Nero, Caligula, and Hadrian built sprawling, opulent seaside palaces here, complete with magnificent domed temples and intricate mosaic floors. It was a place of political intrigue and extravagant parties, where the most powerful figures in the Roman Empire would come to scheme, relax, and escape the pressures of Rome. The sheer concentration of wealth and decadence made Baiae a symbol of Roman excess, a fact that would deeply color the narrative of its downfall for centuries to come. That downfall was not a sudden event, but a relentless, centuries-long phenomenon known as Bradaism. This is a gradual rising and falling of the Earth's crust caused by the movement of magma and hydrothermal activity deep below the surface. In Baiae's case, the ground was slowly sinking. Starting around the 3rd century CE, this subsidence, combined with a gradual rise in sea levels, began to claim the city's shoreline. For generations, engineers fought a losing battle against the sea, building higher walls and trying to reinforce structures, but the ocean was inexorable. Over hundreds of years, the lowest-lying and most luxurious parts of the city were gradually abandoned to the encroaching waters. Where senators once strolled through ornate gardens, fish now darted through colonnades. Unlike the instant destruction of Port Royal or Helike, Baiae's was a slow-motion drowning, a dignified yet inevitable surrender to the sea. This slow submergence had an astonishing result: phenomenal preservation. The silt and sand of the seafloor gently entombed the city's ruins, protecting them from the looting and stone quarrying that destroyed so many ancient sites on land. Today, the archaeological park of Baiae is a world-class underwater marvel. Snorkelers and scuba divers can glide over stunningly intact streets and explore the remains of vast villas. They can swim through the Nymphaeum of Emperor Claudius, where statues of Ulysses and Baiae still stand guard, their faces now covered in soft marine growth. They can hover above intricate black and white mosaic floors, perfectly preserved on the seabed, and float through the cavernous rooms of the so-called Villa Prester, its grand entranceway and supporting columns creating a surreal aquatic landscape. It is not a field of scattered rubble, but a ghost town frozen in time, a silent, watery museum that feels every bit as magical as any description of a mythical lost city. And it is this very spectacle that solidified its mythological status. The city's well-earned reputation for hedonism made its fate a favorite subject for moralizing poets and early Christian writers. They looked at the waves washing over the marble halls and saw not a geological process but divine retribution. The sea hadn't just claimed a city, it had purged a den of iniquity, washing away the sins of the Roman elite in a cleansing flood. This narrative was a powerful way to make sense of a seemingly senseless natural disaster, transforming a complex volcanic event into a simple story of sin and punishment. In this way, Baiae's story seamlessly merged with those of purely mythical places like Aram or Wise. It became a concrete example of a universal theme, that pride and decadence inevitably lead to a fall, and that the gods or nature itself has a way of reclaiming what is rightfully theirs. The modern rediscovery and archaeological exploration of Baiae have done little to dim this mystical aura. If anything, they have enhanced it. The experience of diving there is often described as transcendental, a unique blurring of history, myth, and the natural world. The sight of a marble statue of a Roman matron, her stone eyes now meeting those of an octopus, is a powerful reminder of nature's ultimate dominion over human ambition. Baiae forces us to confront a profound irony. The same volcanic forces that created the luxurious hot springs which made the city famous were also the very forces that conspired to destroy it. It is a place where the line between a verifiable historical site and a legendary sunken world is physically blurred by the water itself. We can touch the same pillars that Roman nobles leaned against, yet we experience them in an environment they could never have imagined, giving us a privileged view of both their world and its surreal, sunken afterlife. Baiae is the ultimate proof that sometimes truth is not only stranger than fiction, but far more poetic. But if the story of Zealandia rewrites our map of the present, the discovery of Mauritia forces us to reimagine the very fabric of deep time, revealing a lost world not through myth, but through the microscopic evidence trapped in grains of sand. This is not a tale passed down through generations, but one unearthed by geologists in a lab, a narrative written in the atomic decay of ancient minerals. The saga began not with an ancient map, but with the volcanic beaches of Mauritius. Here, scientists began finding something that, according to all established geological models, should not have been there. Mixed in with the young, black volcanic sand were tiny, resilient crystals of zircon that were billions of years older than the island itself. It was as if someone had scattered antique jewels across a modern factory floor. The juxtaposition made no sense. The island of Mauritius is a mere infant in geological terms, formed by volcanic activity over the last 8 million years. Yet these zircon crystals were ancient, some dating back almost 2 billion years. The inescapable conclusion was that these ancient timekeepers had to be hitchhikers, picked up by the rising magma as it burned through something much, much older on its journey to the surface. That something was a hidden continent. This forensic evidence pointed to a staggering history buried beneath the waves. Around 85 million years ago, as the supercontinent Gondwana began its final breakup, the massive landmass that would become Madagascar and India started to rift apart. But this separation was not a clean break. Like a piece of glass shattering under stress, the rupture sent fragments flying. One of these fragments was a slender sliver of continental crust, a microcontinent now named Mauritia. For a time, this landmass existed as an island or perhaps even an archipelago in the newborn Indian Ocean, a tropical haven surrounded by blue water, but its fate was sealed by the relentless march of plate tectonics. As the new mid-ocean ridge continued to spread, the delicate fragment of Mauritia was dragged down, swamped by the rising oceanic crust, and ultimately submerged beneath thousands of feet of water and layers of volcanic rock, vanishing from sight for eons. The confirmation of Mauritia's existence is a testament to the power of modern scientific detective work. Researchers didn't find it by spotting ruins on a sonar map, but by using uranium lead dating, a technique that measures the precise radioactive decay within a mineral to calculate its exact age. Those billions-year-old zircons were the ultimate smoking gun, providing incontrovertible proof that a piece of ancient continental crust lies beneath the seafloor around Mauritius and the Seychelles. This discovery fundamentally changes our understanding of how continents break apart. It appears they don't always split neatly along their seams. Instead, they can shatter, sending continental crumbs scattering across the ocean floor like crumbs from a piece of bread. This suggests that the world's oceans, particularly the Indian Ocean, could be littered with other hidden microcontinents, ghost lands waiting for their stories to be read through the atomic clocks within their rocks. What makes the story of Mauritia so profoundly resonant is how it validates the human impulse behind lost world myths through the cold, hard language of science. For centuries, storytellers envisioned continents like Lemuria to explain biological mysteries, a theory that was ultimately proven wrong. Yet, the underlying concept that land can fragment and vanish beneath the waves has been stunningly vindicated. Mauritia is a real Lemuria, not in its location or the reason for its existence, but in its very nature as a sunken fragment of a former world. It demonstrates that the planet's history is filled with forgotten chapters, with entire landmasses that have risen and fallen without any human eye to witness them. These are lost worlds not of gold and magic, but of granite and zircon, and their stories are uncovered not by deciphering ancient texts but by decoding the mineral record. The existence of Mauritia invites us to consider a thrilling possibility, that the most incredible tales of lost lands are not behind us, confined to the pages of history or myth, but ahead of us, waiting on the ocean floor to be discovered by the tools of scientific inquiry, proving once again that geological reality can be every bit as wondrous as our most extravagant legends. While the slow drowning of Baiae offers a hauntingly beautiful glimpse into the Roman world, the discovery of another sunken city provides a window into a past so distant it borders on the mythical. Nestled just beneath the surface of the water in a bay off the southern coast of Greece lies Pavloptri, a name that echoes not with the decadence of emperors, but with the everyday lives of people from a time before recorded history. This is not a legend or a story distorted by time. This is the real deal, the oldest known submerged city in the entire world, a perfectly preserved snapshot of a thriving Bronze Age community that has been lying on the seabed for roughly 5,000 years. Its discovery was almost as serendipitous as the ancient myths themselves. In 1967, the oceanographer Nicholas Fleming was flying over the coast of Laconia when he noticed the telltale outlines of buildings shimmering beneath the clear, shallow water. The following year, a team of archaeologists from the University of Cambridge dove down to confirm it. They were standing in the streets of an entire town that had been lost to the sea. The site was meticulously mapped, revealing a stunningly complex urban plan that was revolutionary for its understanding of the period. But then, for decades, Pavloptre was left largely alone, its secrets guarded by the Mediterranean. It wasn't until 2009 that a major new project, led by the University of Nottingham in collaboration with the Hellenic Centre for Marine Research, returned with cutting-edge technology to fully unveil the city's grandeur. What they found was nothing short of breathtaking. This wasn't just a small village or a collection of huts. Pavloptre was a fully functioning town with a sophisticated layout that speaks to an advanced society. The team, using underwater robots and advanced digital surveying techniques, mapped an area of over 9 acres, revealing a network of streets, buildings, courtyards, and even two-story structures. They identified what were clearly domestic homes, religious buildings, and a complex system of water management, including rock-cut tombs just outside the city limits. The most astonishing revelation was the town's clear and organized urban grid, complete with a central marketplace and a main street. This level of planning was previously thought to have emerged much later in history, forcing archaeologists to completely reconsider the capabilities of early Bronze Age societies in the Aegean. The real treasure of Pavloptre, however, lies not in its stones but in the countless everyday objects that were left behind when the city was abandoned. Because it was gently covered by sand and sealed off from the oxygen and currents that normally destroy organic material, the site is an archaeological time capsule of unparalleled quality. Researchers have recovered thousands of artifacts that paint a vivid picture of daily life in the 2nd millennium BCE. There are large ceramic storage jars called pithoi that would have held oil, wine, and grain. There are beautiful pottery fragments from Crete known as Minon Camers ware, which are instantly recognizable by their elegant designs on a black background. The discovery of these imported luxury goods is a critical piece of evidence, proving that Pavloptre was a key node in a vast and sophisticated Mediterranean trade network long before the glory of classical Greece. This was a cosmopolitan port town, a bustling hub where merchants from different cultures would have met, traded goods, and exchanged ideas. The ultimate question, of course, is what happened to this thriving community. Geological evidence points to a series of catastrophic events, most likely a perfect storm of earthquakes linked to the incredibly active tectonic fault lines in the region. It is believed that a massive quake around 1000 BC caused the land to suddenly subside, plunging the city and its inhabitants beneath the waves in a single traumatic event. This sudden cataclysm is precisely why the site is so well preserved. It was a rapid entombment rather than a slow abandonment. The parallels to the story of Atlantis and other myths of cities swallowed by the sea in a day and a night are immediately obvious and utterly compelling. Pavloptre stands as the most powerful tangible evidence for the kind of event that could have inspired those ancient stories passed down through generations. This real-world discovery fuels our imagination in a way no myth ever could. It forces us to wonder what other chapters of human history are lying just out of sight, hidden beneath the waves on coastlines all around the world. Pavloptre is a direct bridge between the realm of archaeological fact and the powerful, enduring allure of lost world legends. It demonstrates that the sea does not just hide fantasy. It conceals our own forgotten past, offering up silent, stone proof that the stories we tell about sunken cities might have begun with a very real and very human tragedy witnessed 5,000 years ago. Now, let us voyage north from the sunken Roman villas of Baiae to the cold, grey waters of the North Sea, where the waves now conceal one of the most significant and tangible lost worlds in human history. This is not a myth of gods or golden cities, but the story of a very real and once vibrant landscape known as Doggerland. Imagine, if you will, a vast low-lying territory, a sprawling mosaic of gentle hills, lush forests, meandering rivers, and misty marshes connecting the eastern coast of Britain to the mainland of Europe. This was not a narrow land bridge, but a colossal fertile plain, teeming with life and home to thriving communities of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. For thousands of years, this was the heart of a connected continent, a place where people could walk from what is now London to what is now Amsterdam without ever getting their feet wet. The story of Doggerland's rediscovery is a modern archaeological detective story, pieced together not from ancient texts but from the accidental finds of fishermen. For generations, trawlers dragging their nets across the seafloor in an area known as the Dogger Bank have been hauling up more than just fish. Their nets have brought up the tangible, breathtaking evidence of this lost world. The enormous antlers of elk, the gigantic bones of aurochs and mammoths, finely crafted bone and antler tools, and even finely worked flint spear points. Each artifact pulled from the depths was a clue to a landscape that vanished beneath the waves. These chance finds prompted systematic scientific investigation, using advanced seismic survey data originally collected by oil and gas companies. By analyzing this data, geologists and archaeologists have been able to map the long-drowned world with astonishing precision, visualizing its ancient river valleys like the Shotten River, its coastlines and its uplands, all now buried beneath layers of sediment on the seabed. This was far from an empty wasteland. It was a rich ecosystem and a busy human thoroughfare. We know that Mesolithic people tracked game like red deer and wild boar through its forests, set up seasonal camps along its lakeshores, and harvested resources from its diverse environments. The discovery of a beautifully preserved barbed point made from antler found embedded in the skull of an aurochs tells a vivid story of a successful hunt. Even more intimate finds have emerged, such as a chunk of peat dredged from the seafloor that contained the fingerprint of the person who once handled it, a ghostly impression left in the ancient material. Perhaps the most poignant discovery is the fragment of a human skull, a silent reminder that this land was not just visited, but was home to people who lived, loved, and died on this soil. The end of Doggerland was not a single catastrophic event, but a relentless, centuries-long process driven by the warming climate at the end of the last ice age. As the massive continental glaciers melted, global sea levels began to rise inexorably. Slowly, year by year, the sea encroached upon this low-lying paradise. The freshwater lakes became brackish, the forests began to die, and the hunting grounds shrank. The people living there would have witnessed their world changing within their own lifetimes, forced to retreat again and again to ever higher ground. Then, around 6200 BCE, a final, devastating blow was struck. A massive submarine landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a colossal tsunami that roared across the North Sea. This wall of water would have scoured the already flooding landscape, delivering a catastrophic coup de grace to the last remnants of Doggerland and any remaining communities. Within a relatively short time, geologically speaking, the sea completed its victory and the final connections were severed, leaving Britain an island. The existence and eventual loss of Doggerland provide the most compelling real-world explanation for the deep-seated and pervasive flood myths found across European cultures, from the Welsh story of cantre'r to the Breton legend of Wise. These are not mere fairy tales, they are cultural memories, folkloric echoes of a monumental trauma experienced by thousands of generations of people. The slow, inexorable advance of the sea and the sudden terror of a tsunami would have been seared into the collective consciousness of the survivors, stories passed down from parent to child for centuries, slowly evolving from historical accounts into powerful, moralizing legends about the awesome power of nature and the gods. Doggerland demonstrates that the most enduring myths are often rooted in geological truth, a way for humanity to process and make sense of cataclysmic environmental change that reshaped the very world they knew. It stands as a powerful testament to the fact that our planet's map is not fixed, and that the stories we tell about the past often contain a hidden depth waiting beneath the waves for us to discover. While the story of Doggerland reveals a world lost to natural forces over millennia, another kind of lost world was created in a single, deliberate act of modern engineering. Far from the North Sea, in the lush, mountainous province of Zhejiang, China, lies a sunken city of a completely different nature. This is not a legend whispered through the ages, but a verifiable, astonishingly preserved metropolis that vanished beneath the waves within living memory. Known as Shi Cheng, or the Lion City, this was not a victim of earthquake or divine wrath, but a calculated sacrifice to the relentless march of progress, creating an accidental time capsule that now rivals the most fantastical myths in its beauty and mystery. The story of Shi Cheng's submersion begins not in ancient times, but in the mid-20th century. In 1959, the Chinese government made a decision to meet the growing energy and water needs of the region. They sanctioned the construction of the Xinan River hydroelectric station, a monumental project that required the creation of a massive reservoir. The valley chosen for this project, the Valley of the Wuxi Mountain or Five Lion Mountain, was home to the ancient city of Shi Cheng, which had been a bustling hub of political and economic activity for centuries, with a history stretching back to the Eastern Han Dynasty nearly 2,000 years ago. The inhabitants were relocated, their homes abandoned, and as the dam gates closed, the waters began to rise, steadily and silently engulfing the city's magnificent archways, its wide streets, and its exquisitely carved temples. Within a matter of time, Shi Cheng was completely erased from the surface, its existence fading into little more than a local legend, a story of a place that was once there, now hidden under 130 feet of water. For decades, the city slumbered in its deep, cold tomb, forgotten by all but the oldest former residents. Then, in the early 2000s, as interest in dive tourism grew, explorers and historians began to wonder if the stories were true. What they discovered when they plunged into the depths of Qingdao Lake, the Thousand Island Lake Reservoir, was nothing short of miraculous. The same water that had hidden the city had also acted as a perfect preservative. Shielded from the corrosive effects of wind, rain, and sun, the intricate stonework of Shi Cheng remained almost perfectly intact. Divers found themselves gliding through a silent, dreamlike metropolis where time had simply stopped. They could make out the grand, ceremonial archways marking the city gates, wide main streets paved with stone, and over 260 ornate archways, many still standing proudly. The most breathtaking details were the carvings, stone lions, dragons, phoenixes, and historical inscriptions adorning the walls of temples and pagodas, all crisply defined as if they had been chiseled yesterday. This incredible preservation has completely blurred the line between modern history and ancient myth. Shi Cheng did not fall to a cataclysm. It was intentionally sacrificed, and its story is thoroughly documented. Yet to swim through its silent streets, to hover above roofs and peer into windows that haven't seen light in over half a century, is an experience that feels utterly mythological. It possesses all the romance and wonder we associate with Atlantis or Wise, a sunken city of stunning artistry, frozen in a silent, aqueous world. It forces us to reconsider what truly makes a lost world. Is it the passage of millennia or simply the act of being hidden from our everyday view? Shi Cheng proves that a place doesn't need to be ancient to feel ancient. It simply needs to be lost and then found again under circumstances that defy our expectations. The ongoing exploration of the Lion City has turned it into a unique underwater museum and a world-renowned destination for technical divers. Archaeologists and film crews have meticulously mapped the site, revealing its vast scale and providing a stunningly clear window into Chinese architectural styles from the Ming and Qing dynasties. The city's layout, with its 5 gates and towers instead of the traditional 4, offers invaluable insights into urban planning and the cultural significance of the period. The very water that submerged it now protects it from the looting and pollution that have damaged so many historical sites on land. In a profound irony, the act that was meant to erase Shi Cheng in the name of the future has instead immortalized it, saving it from the slow decay that would have inevitably claimed it had it remained on the surface. It stands today not as a ruin but as a pristine preservation, a monument to what was willingly given up for progress, and a hauntingly beautiful reminder that sometimes our most breathtaking glimpses into the past are found not by digging into the earth but by diving into the depths. And so we reach our final destination, not at the ruins of a city or the shore of a sunken land, but within the depths of our own collective consciousness. After this grand tour of 30 legends, from the philosophical allegory of Atlantis to the very real, drowned streets of Port Royal and Shi Cheng, one towering question remains: why? Why does humanity, across every culture and every century, remain so powerfully captivated by these stories of vanished worlds? The answer is as complex and layered as the myths themselves, woven from the very fabric of human psychology. It begins with a primal desire for mystery, an innate need for the map to still have a few blank spaces. In a world that often feels fully charted, quantified, and explained, these legends preserve a sense of wonder, a thrilling possibility that just beyond the horizon of our understanding, something magnificent and unknown still waits. They satisfy a deep nostalgia, not for a real past, but for an imagined golden age, a time of purity, wisdom, or incredible advancement that we feel we have somehow lost. This nostalgia is a powerful comfort, suggesting that perfection, though lost, was once achievable and perhaps could be again. These stories also serve a profound moral purpose, functioning as cultural cautionary tales on a grand scale. The repetitive theme of a glorious civilization brought low by its own hubris, greed, or decadence, seen in the falls of Atlantis, Aram, and Wise, is a universal warning. It is a narrative mechanism that reinforces social values, reminding us that even the greatest human achievements are fragile and that ethical living is essential for survival. This moral framework helps us make sense of otherwise senseless tragedies, like the earthquake that sank Helike, by transforming random geological events into stories with meaning and consequence. Beyond morality, these myths have been a relentless engine for real-world exploration and discovery. The frantic, often tragic quest for El Dorado drove the European mapping of South America. The search for the 7 cities of Shambhala opened up the American Southwest. The romantic dream of Zazora led to the development of modern desert exploration techniques that would later be used in wartime. The longing for a mythical Hyperborea or Prester John's kingdom spurred voyages that expanded the known world, proving that even our fantasies can push the boundaries of reality. Now, in our modern era, technology plays a fascinating dual role, simultaneously debunking old myths while giving birth to new, equally captivating possibilities. Sophisticated sonar mapping, satellite radar, and LiDAR have definitively closed the book on sunken continents like Lemuria, proving the seafloor's geological composition could never support such a landmass. Yet, these same tools have unveiled the very real, drowned landscapes of Doggerland and Beringia, showing us that while continents didn't sink, vast, habitable stretches of our world most certainly did. We no longer search for golden cities with wooden ships and hand-drawn maps. We use sub-bottom profilers and remotely operated vehicles to uncover the sunken forests of Wales or the lost villages of the North Sea. We discover not the fantasy of Mu, but the reality of Zealandia, a true submerged continent that forces us to rewrite our textbooks. This technological revolution hasn't killed the allure of lost worlds. It has simply shifted its focus from pure fantasy to amplified reality. The same human impulse that once pictured Atlantis now fuels our fascination with the very real, very mysterious sunken city of Pavloptri. The dream that drove conquistadors into the jungle now drives archaeologists to scour the Amazon with satellite imagery, not for El Dorado, but for the lost strongholds of the Inca like Paititi. The stories persist because they speak to something eternal within us, a boundless curiosity, a hunger for discovery, and a humble recognition of our own small place in a vast and ever-changing world. These myths are more than just stories. They are a fundamental part of our storytelling DNA, a timeless reminder that whether through the lens of religion, science, or sheer imagination, we will always be drawn to the horizon, forever wondering what wonders lie just out of sight, waiting to be found. As we reflect on this extraordinary journey through 30 legends of vanished worlds, a profound pattern emerges from the depths of history and human consciousness. We began with the philosophical allegory of Atlantis, a story designed to caution against hubris, and traveled through the scientific misconception of Lemuria, the spiritual refuge of Shambhala, and the very real drowned streets of Port Royal and Pavloptri. We've stood on the shores of Brittany and heard the bells of Wise, and we've dived into the submerged palaces of Baiae. We've even explored continents that truly did vanish, like Zealandia and Doggerland, whose stories are written not in ancient texts but in the very geology of our planet. This vast tapestry of tales, woven from threads of memory, morality, and geology, reveals something fundamental about us. We are a species haunted by what we have lost and driven by the hope of what we might rediscover. These stories are far more than simple entertainment. They are a fundamental part of how we process our place in a world that is constantly changing. They give narrative shape to the very real geological trauma of rising seas, of earthquakes, and of shifting coastlines that our ancestors witnessed and passed down through generations. The legend of cantre'r, born from the drowning of a Welsh plain, and the myth of the lioness echoing the inundation of Doggerland, show us how folklore can preserve a kernel of truth for millennia. They transform incomprehensible natural disasters into moral lessons, as seen in the fiery end of Iram or the watery punishment of Wise, providing a framework to understand why catastrophe strikes and how communities might avoid it in the future. This is the primary power of the Lost World myth. It turns random chaos into a story with meaning, consequence, and ultimately a warning we can heed. Ultimately, this enduring fascination speaks to a deep and abiding human yearning. It is a yearning for mystery in a world that feels increasingly mapped and explained. It is a nostalgia for an idealized golden age we imagine was purer, wiser, or more advanced than our own. And it is an unshakable curiosity about the blank spaces on the map, the unanswered questions in our history books, and the possibilities that still lie hidden, waiting for the right explorer or the right technology to reveal them. The quest for these worlds has never truly ended. It has simply evolved. We are no longer Spanish conquistadors hacking through jungles in search of El Dorado. Today, we are archaeologists using LiDAR to peel back the Amazonian canopy, geologists analyzing zircon crystals to find microcontinents like Mauritia, and divers swimming through the sunken city of Shi Cheng. The tools have changed, but the drive remains identical. So, as this journey concludes, we turn the question over to you. Which of these lost worlds resonates most deeply with your own imagination? Does the spiritual promise of Shambhala call to you, or the tragic, romantic downfall of Atlantis? Are you drawn to the historical detective story of Helike or the modern, intentional loss of Shi Cheng? The conversation about these mysteries is itself a part of their enduring legacy. Share your thoughts and your favorite myth in the comments below. We'd love to hear which story captured your sense of wonder. And if you've enjoyed this expedition into history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe for our next adventure. The map is never truly complete, and the next lost world is always waiting just over the horizon.